The Rise of Iceland. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 1, Blonde Olaf. Julian calendar June 1627 Iceland's Circeanic Peninsula. This peninsula is a dozen kilometers south of Reykjavik, a large port city in Iceland. Because it is close to the port, 90% of the peninsula is also fertile land, so it covers an area of hundreds of miles. The peninsula is full of small villages, which is considered to be an area with a relatively concentrated and large population of residents on Iceland. The dark middle world is over. Now is the era of great navigation. The world is undergoing drastic changes, and the cultural beliefs of all countries are changing rapidly, but Iceland is still a slow life, like a paradise, as if it had not become a land under the rule of the United Kingdom of Denmark, Norway in 1262. The number of villages on the Circean Peninsula has only increased by 3 in the past few centuries, and the population of each village is between about 30 and 50 or 60. The largest white hazel forest in Heir village has only there were more than 100 people. This was originally a large manor called Hraunstykki. Later, when there were more free people, it became a small village. There is a fertile field on the north side of the peninsula. It is summer, and the wheat seedlings on these fields are beginning to form ears. Although it looks sparse, the warm sea breeze shakes slightly and looks very gratifying. Although Iceland has a warm sea breeze blowing from west to east, it is on the edge of the Arctic Circle after all. The warmth of the year is only from May to October, and the real crops grow only in the second half of May. It's only September. To the east of the large field is a small hill with some white hazel trees. This kind of tree is a drought-tolerant tree that grows only in the cold zone of Siberia. It is similar to shrubs and cannot grow very tall. The only advantage is that it can produce some rich in oil and starchy nuts. This hazelnut is considered a cherished food that is a specialty of Iceland. Under a white hazel tree, there is a teenage boy wearing white linen pants and a deerskin windbreaker. He has golden hair like golden silk, which is more beautiful in the sun, and the deep eye sockets under the bushy eyebrows. There is a pair of piercing and big eyes. The blue eyes are as translucent as gems. The high nose, thin lips and snow-white skin prove that this is a typical Nordic German, and it is also commonly known as a Wajingrin. The child's name is Olaf Hadarsson, the second son of Heir, the leader of Heir village in the White Hazel Grove. He is also the child with the most beautiful hair in his family and even in the village, so people also call Olaf blonde, or blonde. Olaf is only 10 years old this year, but because he has had enough nutrition since he was a child and inherited his father's tall and burly genes, he has grown to a height of nearly 5 feet. At first glance, he looks like an ordinary 5-year-old boy. Lang is up in this era when the height of European people generally does not exceed 5 feet, 152.4 cm. The Germanic people in Scandinavia, Iceland, Denmark and other regions are considered to be the tallest category. Nearly half of the men are only 5.5, 165.1 cm, less than feet. Olaf's father and uncle are both 6 feet and 5 inches tall, so they also have the nickname Big Guy. Olaf sits on a bare rock under the white hazel tree, holding a charcoal stick in his hand as a pen, writing and drawing on a stack of yellowed paper. Sometimes he will mutter something while writing. If someone could get close to Olaf and look at it, he would see that all the words he wrote on the paper were square and square. If someone who had been to the Far East aiming to do business saw it, they might recognize it as similar. Domingo's text. In 1627, China was in the Mingke or Chongzhen period, and 1644 was the time when the Ming dynasty fell. It is understood that this era is still the most powerful, wealthy and civilized country in the world. Now is the era of great navigation. The Middle Ages in Europe have long ended. The power of the Pope in Rome has been greatly reduced. The emergence of Protestantism, also called Christianity, has weakened theocratic power even more. For the control of the crown, Denmark and Iceland are now the Protestant Lutheran parishes. However, Paris, one of the most developed regions in Europe, is still full of garbage, sewage is overflowing, and the water source is full of E. coli. It is a good place to live in the paradise of Iceland. There are no mosquitoes, cockroaches, insects, and the Black Death. It also has no relationship with Iceland. The environment is good. As long as you don't catch colds or more, you can live a long life. The only disadvantage is that life is too boring and material is extremely scarce. If you don't use wool and sheepskin and other materials to exchange flour, wood and cloth with the United Kingdom and Denmark, your life will be a success. Question: this diary-like note came from Olaf, but Olaf is not an Icelander born with nothing. Olaf has memories of his previous life since he was born. He clearly knows that his previous life was the North Drift of Huaguo-Yanjing. He has worked as a security guard, worked as a tallyman, ran sales, and bought CD-ROMs. His only hobby is to like Chinese and foreign history, but you can forget it when you read it, and you can't remember many real things after being reborn in Iceland. Olaf knew that he could only work hard to live his life. He started to learn Icelandic language and the living habits of Icelanders since he was a year old, so that he can integrate into the life of Icelanders as soon as possible, and become from the inside. An Icelander. Olaf is indeed very clever. He can speak at the age of 1.5 to form words. He can accurately express his needs in one sentence when he is less than 2 years old. This surprises his father Heir and mother Catelyn. Their relatives and neighbors are also proud of this. After all, there are some rare things in an area like Iceland that can be treasured. When Olaf was 3 years old, he was able to basically live independently as long as the family had ready-made food. After Olaf was 2 years old, he began to try to use the charcoal left over from the fire at home to record the historical knowledge and time points of this era that he had worked hard to think of, as well as various technological technologies. Olaf painted Chinese characters on the stone walls of his hut. Later, he found the old sheepskins at home to record. Only recently did he get rough but usable paper. Olaf originally thought he was very good. He could remember the ratio of nitrate, sulfonate and charcoal and the processes of porcelain burning, wine making, vinegar brewing, and paper making. Basic physics, basic chemistry and other knowledge can also write a lot of content silently. But the problem is that he only knows the superficial procedures and basic content. To succeed in the operation, he may have to go through thousands of failures, and some experiments require specific tools. After understanding the backward social level of Iceland, Olaf no longer thought more about it. Therefore, Olaf's desire to use the advanced knowledge in his mind to develop an industry to get rich overnight has long been shattered. Olaf now only writes down the knowledge he can think of and the memory of current historical events, thinking that he can rely on prophetic foresight to make political speculation in the future. Maybe he can reach the pinnacle of life, and maybe he can become famous in the history books. There are characters with surnames and stories, not the people of Iceland. When Olaf discussed with his father last night about the only merchant ship in the family, he heard that his father said that the hull was eaten badly by ship maggots this year, and he had to spend a sum of money to buy wood repairs. Since the beginning of the spring of this year, he made more than half of the money he earned from 2 trips to England. On the ship repair, Olaf didn't sleep well all night. He thought of the article on ship maggot management he had read in his previous life, and then ran out early in the morning to record the method of controlling ship maggots that he could use now. European sailors still use the most traditional method to prevent and control ship maggots, that is, using asphalt, glue, and tar to soak the wood, but after a long time in use, they still cannot prevent the emergence of ship maggots. Olaf knows only 3 methods. Reading www.uucan't.com. 1 is to soak the wood with copper sulfate and then brush with tune oil. This effect is very good, but copper sulfate is not found in Iceland now. The second method is to coat the hull with copper or iron. This is also very effective, but the cost is extremely high, which is not the method that the current Olaf family can afford. Moreover, the current sailing technology and ships cannot withstand copper and iron. After the weight, the last method is very simple, that is, the boat sails into the freezing freshwater river and uses the cold and fresh water to kill marine life such as boat maggots, but it takes more than 3 months to adopt this method. Generally speaking, no one's boat can be idle for so long, but the last method is the most suitable for Olaf's family. Iceland's winter produces nothing, no production activities, continuous sub-zero temperature and occasional snow, and it's not suitable to go out. This makes Icelandic people can only stay at home, eat, drink and sleep, and wait until the next spring the weather changes. Only after warming up did they start production and life, or go to be a pirate to grab a ticket, or drive a boat to do a few business trips, or plan to work in the fields. Olaf thinks that before the coming of winter this year, Heir can drive a boat to the Shorsa River, and wait until next spring at the latest that the boat maggots in the hull will be completely dead. Feeling that this method is very good, Olaf solemnly put away his treasure book, and then walked out of the white hazel forest that was handed down from his ancestors for more than 200 years to the east village. Note, the unit for measuring length in ancient Europe is the length of steps and feet. 1 inch or 1 inch is the width in front of the thumb joint. Later in the 13th century, King Edward II promulgated the standard legal inch. From the middle of the barley ear, choose the 3 largest grains that are 1 inch long in a row head to head. Converted to millimeters, it is about 25.4 millimeters. 12 inches is 1 foot. Chapter 2, Bad News. Olaf walked east for several hundred meters along the dirt road paved with gravel beside the wheat field. After turning a birch forest, he saw a patchwork of green thatched houses. A few of them have 27 or 8 houses, and some are large. Some are smaller. These houses are all stone walls. The walls are more than 5 or 6 feet thick. The walls and roofs are covered with grass, and some have small yellow flowers. They look very beautiful, as if they have entered a fairy tale world. This kind of turf house has a history of 700 or 800 years. The ancestors built this kind of thick stone in order to make the wooden structure and roof of the house strong and durable, and have the effect of keeping warm in winter and cool in summer. Houses with walls and turf roofs, walls and roofs with soil and turf can insulate from the cold, which can be regarded as the crystallization of the ingenuity of Iceland's ancestors when fighting bad weather. Olaf slowly approached the village. At the entrance of the village, several 50-something old women who were sewing clothes while basking in the sun first greeted Olaf with a smile. Young Master Blonde is back. Olaf, your mother is looking for you. Olaf, you look taller again. The kind jokes and affectionate words of a few old people made Olaf smile too. He smiled and said, Hjalti, be careful that old Gelder beats you after drinking too much. Aunt Venered, when will you do it for me? A pair of trousers? Big Eye's sister, your job is not very good. Olaf made a few jokes with the neighbors in these villages. Everyone laughed and then walked into the village. There were also other men and women on the road. Everyone was busy pouring beets or spinach and radishes. These 3 vegetables are currently available. I found vegetables that can grow in summer in Iceland, so everyone grows more or less. There are only 150 and 60 people in the village, mostly descendants of 7 ancient families. The long-term settlement has allowed everyone to marry. At present, they are basically relatives. Therefore, everyone in the village is connected to each other. Familiar and close, Olaf greeted everyone warmly on the road, and the younger ones preferred to say a few words to Olaf. A 13 or 4-year-old boy with red hair and freckles ran over in a shabby and fat dirty robe and said, Olaf, your mother is looking for you. I heard that it is from Reykjavik, a large port city, Icelandic, smoking Gulf Coast. People from there brought bad news. The red-haired boy named Likstrom is one of Olaf's best playmates. His father, Jort, is the only carriage dealer in the village. He has a large carriage to carry people out in a nearby village. Tom, who did you fight with again? Olaf looked at the mud print on Likstrom and asked with a frown. Although Tom is a few years older than Olaf, he is Olaf's attendant. He curled his lips and said, you are not here this morning. The big Hadarsson from the village of Will next door brought people over. Last time you took us to fight, they slumped a few somersaults severely, but if you were not here this morning, we suffered a bit. Or else you will take us to clean them up in the afternoon. There are more than 100 people in Herit village of Bay's Homeland Forest, and there are only more than 30 large and small families. There are more than 40 children between the ages of a few and adolescents. Excluding girls and children under the age of 7, there are more than 20 boys. These boys are basically Olaf's followers because Olaf knows a lot, although he is young and strong, although he has only learned ancient poetry from the old poets in the village, and he has not studied in the Southern District Church for a few days. He speaks clearly and people like to listen to him. The children know that Olaf speaks more accurately and better than adults, and in the past 2 years, everyone has never suffered from fighting with Olaf and the children in the neighboring village. Olaf will take everyone to dig traps. He also knows where it hurts to beat people and knows great fighting skills. So now the boys and girls in the village are convinced by Olaf and willingly be his subordinates. Olaf was about the same height as Likstrom, reached out his hand to help him pat the dirt, and said, don't rush to get revenge. I'll go home and see what's going on, okay? You are right to hear Olaf. Tom wiped his nose and turned and left. Olaf quickened his pace and soon entered a large yard with 3 turf houses. The yard was made of stones and small wooden walls. Inside and outside the walls were grass and wildflowers, and there was one more stable inside the wall. The crossbred Shire horse looked at, although it was no longer as strong, its 4 hooves were still very strong, thank God. Olaf, you are finally back. As soon as Olaf entered the yard, a slender middle-aged woman walked out of the big house on the east side. She had blonde hair and looked good. She was Olaf's mother. Caitlin Katrin is harsh and rude to the children like the mistresses of other families, but only very polite to Olaf. As if facing an adult Olaf followed his mother into the room and saw the tall and burly father Hader sitting at the wooden table with a sad expression on his face. Opposite him sat a middle-aged man who was as short as himself. He had black curly hair and not a dense black beard, a little thin, but very energetic. Olaf, this is your other uncle Hoskard. He and your uncle Kadir are half-brothers. He lives in Reykjavik, Smoking Harbor. Hader first introduced Olaf to his uncle Hoskard, whom he had never seen before, and then turned to Hoskard and said, Olaf, you have heard of it, my son, a child prodigy, genius. He is the ancestor of Hoskard. I think you should tell him the bad news that you have given me. Hoskard laughed suddenly and looked at Olaf with his eyes bright. He didn't look down on Olaf, but he got up and patted his sturdy shoulder. He smiled and said, I can't believe you are Olaf. Are you only 10 years old? Looks taller and stronger than my 16-year-old son. It's great, I have heard of you. You are naturally smart and good at dealing with problems. Perhaps it is the reincarnation of the heroic spirits of your ancestors. At the last sentence, Hoskard's voice suddenly became very small. After all, Iceland is now a place where the Lord's glory has been received. Even though many Icelanders believe in God, Christ, they also believe in the gods and ancestral spirits passed down by their ancestors, but speaking out openly is challenging the religious rule of Catholicism and Christianity status. Although there is no burning to death of infidels now, but if the governor knows about it, he must be severely punished. Forfeiture of property, whipping and imprisonment are all possible. Your father is very lucky. Let me tell you what I got. You reading www.uucan'tchoo.com has a deep hatred with your family. Sigfus suddenly got lucky. His daughter married a new Iceland Lord Governor Calvin. The big man on their list is completely shaken. Even their servants walks like a big cock. Sigforth has always wanted to occupy your property, even though he didn't have it 7 years ago. Success. Now he has said that if his son-in-law, the governor of Iceland, Lord Karlsman, will take the initiative to seize your property, perhaps soon Lord Korsvan will hold a court meeting to discuss your affairs. Hoskard quickly said the matter, and then he took a sip of beer from the wooden cup on the table. Oh, this is really not good news. Olaf frowned, and finally understood why the optimistic father Hader looked sad. Olaf sits on a stone stool thinking about the bad news brought by his uncle who just met. He knows very well that if everything is true, the life and death of his family will become unknown. Olaf dare not talk about democracy and freedom like other travelers. I have a dream, revenge, sports, etc. There is no doubt that people who are fighting for the dead, with strict hierarchies, and dissent, talking about democracy and freedom, legal reforms and other nouns will be smashed by the iron fist of feudalism, and then thrown into the dunghill of history. This is beyond doubt. Thing is the hanging rope too soft or the stone not hard? Is it because the fire that burns the heresy is not hot, or the knife that hacks people is disadvantageous? P.S. Court meeting. Since Iceland became a free state in the 10th century AD, it was a self-management mechanism. The leaders and legal elders from all over the country handled disputes between Icelanders. This is now called the earliest parliament. According to the author's research, the birth of the Iceland parliament seems it originated from the Viking pirates' internal habit of handling disputes, especially economic disputes. Chapter 3, Feudal Society is Eating People. Olaf is a typical second-generation rich and second-generation official in Iceland. His father Hader has the right to lead the village of Herod in the White Hazel Grove, which was inherited from his ancestors. His ancestor Harut was this hundreds of years ago. The owner and leader of a piece of land. The identity of the ancestor at that time was called Godi, holy person, meaning noble person, person close to God. Godi, large or small, owns the management rights and ownership of the local manor population and land resources, and also controls judicial interpretation and judgment. He is the administrator of Iceland. Therefore, Harut, known as the Grey Cloak Jal, was a leader of the Icelandic people's self-made organization, Alting, who was responsible for ruling the Sirtiana Peninsula. Later, Iceland was surrendered to the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway. The chiefs of Godi everywhere were just squires and landlords, and at most they held the positions of village chiefs, but their rights were greatly reduced later, due to various reasons. Mainly the Black Death caused the population to decrease. In order to attract farmers to pay rent and tax-free people increased. In some European countries, Serfs gradually disappeared and became free people. Although they can still be exploited, after all the identities are basically equal. Iceland is also full of big landlords and free people. Of course, poor free people still have to work as servants and tenant farmers in the big landlord's house, but they have a contract for small landlords and small nobles. The power is getting smaller and smaller. When Olaf's ancestral leader position was passed to his father Heir, there was only one village leader's name. The original servants had already become free people. Most of them had their own land, but thinking about the old feelings, the people all respect Heir. If things are just like this, Olaf can still be a second-generation landlord, living a life of worry-free life, but when he was almost 3 years old, a huge change occurred in the family. Heir controlled more than 300 veals. Girt, unit of land measurement, lost more than half of the land. Heir has 3 sisters and a younger brother. The younger brother Hagrid is stronger and taller than Heir. Both brothers have practiced swordsmanship inherited from their ancestors and skills that qualified Viking pirates should master, such as fighting, wrestling, and riding. But Hagrid, obviously more proficient than Heir. Hagrid has been better at fighting since he was a boy of 2 brothers, and he has also killed many merchants' shipguards when he went to sea to plunder. His brutality and combativeness made him have no one dare to provoke him in Circeanic Peninsula. Reputation. This situation lasted until Olaf was more than 2 years old. Hagrid killed the opponent because of a duel with a woman. If the opponent was just a freedman or a small landlord, things would soon subside, but the other party is the son of a great leader in the great port of Reykjavik. This great leader has hundreds of years of inheritance. His ancestors also came from the cardinals of Iceland, and his influence is 10 times stronger than that of the Heir family. Not only that, but what is even more frightening is that the deceased was the godson of the cardinal of the Icelandic diocese at that time. At that time, the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway had not yet converted to Protestantism, and the Catholic bishop in Iceland was very full killed the bishop's godson, and at the same time the opponent was a leader of Degen. At that time, it was foreseeable that Hagrid's fate could only be arrested by the governor of Iceland and then hanged in Degen. At that time Hagrid fled back to Heir village in the White Hazel Forest immediately after the murder, and told his eldest brother Heir that after discussing with the brothers, Hagrid decided to let Hagrid leave Iceland by boat. At that time, the brothers chose the Greenland. At that time, Norway and Denmark were not able to go. The Kingdom of Scotland on the British Isles was promoting Protestantism, hoping to get the support of neighbors. Therefore, they had good relations with the Kingdom of Denmark. Greenland is a land outside the law. Although it is also part of Denmark in name, Denmark cannot even send a governor to it, because there are few people and resources, and there is not much value. Olaf knew that the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway later followed the example of the British and other colonial powers and established the Greenland Company to colonize Greenland, so Hagrid's escape was not a long-term safety. After thinking about it, Olaf decided to change the opinions of his father and uncle, but he was less than 3 years old. Even though they thought they were genius child prodigies, they would never listen to a child on major events in life. Thinking of the primitive Norse mythology that the Vikings still believe in, Olaf suddenly had an idea. At that time, Olaf suddenly pushed in with the roll of sheepskin, and then sang a prelude to the ancient war hymn in his mouth. Then he put the sheepskin on his head and sang, "The god of sleep avoided my eyes, the giant of the god of war the axe hangs in front of me, and the brave Heir is slowly awakening." In the spring, the sword drowned Hagrid in the green. "I can't accept it, so I also send you some advice." Olaf's pretending to be a fool instantly stunned Heir, the Catlins, Hagrid, and his eldest brother Olaf. None of these people would worry about a 2.5-year-old child pretending to be a ghost. Even if Olaf is smart, or if children are not on their world, adults cannot act like this. Everyone realizes that the ancestor Heir, the heroic spirit revived on Olaf's body. The heroic ancestors will be approached by the of war after their deaths. When the descendants of the family face great disasters, they will be revived in the best offspring. This is a myth and legend passed down by the Viking population. Heir and Hagrid would never think of fairy tales. The story will come true, but Olaf's performance made them have to believe. They knew that if Hagrid went to Greenland, he would end up being killed. So they asked the ancestor Heir to point out the direction. Olaf continued to sing in a desolate tune, "The farthest place the Vikings have been to Winland, where's the glorious restoration of the family? I think of the fertile land of Wenland, and I think of the native Scala of Wenland. Lin Ren, thou was the best slave. I remembered that before I went to Wenland, I had to go to Britain. There were countless frustrated people there, all of whom were the best slaves, put on weapons, after Olaf sang it more than 10 times. Hagrid and others also understood the meaning of Olaf's lyrics. They agreed that the ancestor heir was to let Hagrid go to Wenland, where the ancients had been, to avoid disasters. That Wenland was in the southwest of Greenland, with countless treasures and primitive and ugly natives, as well as fertile land and animals. The ancestors asked Hagrid to go to Scotland to recruit the poor people who had confiscated land and farming opportunities, to go to Vinland to capture indigenous slaves, plant and breed, and colonize, because in the last century, Spain, Portugal and other countries have made great fortunes by colonizing overseas. Hagrid and Hader also knew that colonization was a risky but extremely rewarding business. With the prophecies of their ancestors, Hagrid and Hader immediately changed their goals. Hader gave Hagrid the family's largest commercial and robbery brig mixed sailing ship, and at the same time gave Hagrid the family's silver coins of more than 2,400 marks. The family used the most powerful servants. Hagrid and his eldest son Olaf also let Hagrid take them away. He only asked Hagrid to take root in Wenland, as his ancestors said, and manage it well. After Hagrid took away the big boats and wealth accumulated by the family for several generations, early the next morning, he went to the British Isles to recruit more than 100 young white farmers who had no arable land, according to Olaf's words. Seeing the nautical chart and the compass heading westward, he did reach Wenland in the end, and had a stronghold, arrested hundreds of indigenous people as slaves to help farm the land, which was regarded as a heel. These things are all 3 years later, when Hader sent Olaf sailed back to England and recruited a group of contracted white slaves. He went back to Iceland to tell Hader and Olaf. However, Olaf also told Hader and Olaf one thing that Olaf did not know, that is, in fact, Vinland and even the Americas have already become colonies of other European powers, such as Britain and France, but their focus is on the South American generation. At present, only France has a stronghold in North America, which is not a climate at all, and provides rare furs of some animals to the royal family at most every year. Although Wenland, that is, Newfoundland, has no stronghold, some British guys have declared their power over Wenland many years ago. After Hagrid and Olaf arrived in Wenland, although they stood firm, read www.uucan'tchoo.com, but for the sake of not being targeted by other countries such as the United Kingdom and France, but also expressed support for the United Kingdom to own Newfoundland. Living here and dealing with French and British businessmen, the primitive society of the Americas needed a lot of capital and human input to colonize. The history of the development of North America in Britain relied on criminal garbage and Puritans. It took hundreds of years to clear out most of the natives from the soil of the United States. The current Britain does not have the energy to develop Vinland, so the emergence of Olaf made the British and even French colonists in North America happy to see it. Instead, they extended a certain helping hand. Olaf has truly gained the respect of his family's elders with his 2.5-year-old pretend, instead of looking at the appreciation and affection of smart children before, but treating Olaf as an adult. This is because Hader and the others regard Olaf as the carrier of the heroic spirit of the ancestor heir, and they also believe that Olaf is the best descendant selected by the ancestors. It's just that these things and their thoughts are unknown to everyone, except those who have experienced it. After all, when Catholicism and Christianity occupied the entire European religious market, no one dared to publicly publicize that their beliefs originated in Scandinavia. Religious beliefs in the Asian peninsula. Note, Weirgit, a unit of land measurement. 1 Weirgit is approximately equal to 40 acres, and 40 acres is equal to 242 acres in China. During the Middle Ages, European agriculture was extremely underdeveloped, and there was a rotation of land every year, so about half the land of Weirgit could feed according to the population of 3 to 8 people. A farm household can feed a family between 10 acres, 60 acres in China, and 20 acres, 120 acres in China. Mark, a unit of currency measurement. 1 mark is about 220 to 233 grams. Wenland, Newfoundland. Chapter 4, Coping Method. Olaf gained the respect of his father Hader and mother Catelyn through a performance. From the summer of the 2.5 years, the husband and wife will discuss with Olaf on any matter in the family and ask for his opinion. Olaf also: I am happy to help my parents, so I will always give pertinent and effective opinions. Although some of them do not have a good effect due to differences in regional culture, most of the suggestions are always useful. After Hagrid left that year, the governor's guard arrived within a few days. After discovering Hagrid's escape, Sigfurs refused to give up. He pressured the governor through the bishop and implemented bribes. In the end, the governor of Iceland followed the original Icelandic laws. Hader was sentenced to pay Sigfurs 10,000 marks, a unit of currency, silver coins in Iceland, 100 mark silver coins are worth more than half the value of the land of Wilgut, which is equal to the total net worth of a free man. The 10,000 mark silver coin is converted into the currency value of the Ming dynasty at the same time. It is also equivalent to more than 58,000 taels of silver, which is enough to buy a decent mansion in Beijing. If you are an official and buy an official, it is enough to cost a good prefect. The Haider family couldn't get the 10,000 mark silver coin. The family business that their ancestors had accumulated for generations was more than 300 verge land and 2 good merchant ships. In addition to the more than 2,000 marks given to Hagrid, the cash only had a jar buried underground. 100 mark of gold coins, and the rest are some gold and silver jewelry. After Haider's struggle and negotiation, the two finally reached a consensus. Haider pays 8,000 mark silver coins to the Sigfus family. Since Haider did not receive any cash, the governor of Iceland will set the most fertile land in Haider's family to 100 veals. The cultivated land of Grid was confiscated and sold at a price of 12,000 marks, which was just enough to pay the Sigfus family and pay fines and transaction taxes. In this era, any transaction generated an income from production and operation must be paid to feudal lords, governments, and churches, and the proportion of such taxes is very high. The highest can reach nearly 30%. Because this kind of tax is likely to be superimposed because of this lawsuit, Olaf went from a big rich second generation to a small rich second generation, and Haider also changed from a big landowner to a small landlord. The family has inherited the most fertile 100 veal in the more than 300 village land. There is no arable land in Grid, only the barren arable land of 100 virgin and more than 100 virgin lands with some gravel, and the remaining 100 virgin of the harvest will not even lose half of the yield of that land. But Haider had no way to resist, so he accepted it obediently. More than 7 years have passed since the matter, whether it was Haider or Olaf, everyone felt that the matter was over long ago. But now Hoskard suddenly came from Reykjavik, the great port, and told them that Sigfort did not stop. He still wanted to pass his son-in-law, the new governor of Iceland, to rediscuss the case 7 years ago and use feudalism. The most terrifying political force of the time came to force Haider to submit, and plundered the last fields and resources of Harrit Manor. Is Sigfort a mountain spirit? He is more vicious than Fenrir. Before Haider could speak, Catelyn mumbled, mountain spirit is a cunning and insidious monster in Nordic legends, while Fenrir is the son of the evil Loki, a wolf-shaped evil who can swallow heaven and earth with his mouth open, and is brother to the serpent that entangles the world. In Nordic legends, the king Odin was swallowed by Fenrir and died. There is no such in the world of Vikings, because they do not have the serious moral and human relations inherited by Confucian culture like China. In Iceland, in addition to cheating, there are some bad relations between men and women in any form. Normal, so cursing from a sexual perspective does not exist in Viking culture. So being able to call people mountain spirit, devil, monster, etc. is already the most severe insult. Because they believe in these religious cultures, it is a great insult to compare people to the devil in mythology. Hoskard also echoed, my sister said, is there anyone who is more greedy and hateful than Sigfort? What do we do? Next month is this year's court meeting. If the governor publicly asks for the redisposal of the case 7 years ago at the court meeting, Sigfurs will definitely win the consent of other leaders. What will we do then? Katrin was a little flustered. Haider is just an honest little landlord with some courage and strength. Although he has been to church school for a few days, he obviously doesn't have much knowledge, let alone how to deal with such difficult problems. So he looked at Olaf, asked, Olaf, what do you think we should do? Yes, Olaf, you say. Katrin also hurriedly agreed. This is the second time Hoskard saw his nephew when Olaf was born, but he also heard his sister say that his nephew was extraordinary, so he looked at Olaf curiously. Olaf pondered for a long time, and finally hesitated. We are just a little better manner than the freedmen. If the governor and Sigfurs collude against us, I don't think we can fight back. Haider and Katrina were pale. Hoskard also sighed. Olaf continued, but there is a poem that says it well, the sword has its own shield to block it. We really don't want to be lambs to be slaughtered, there is a way. What did you think of? Let's say, as long as we can save our family, I am willing to try any method. Haider solemnly looked at Olaf with firm eyes. Olaf thought for a while and said, as the old saying goes, the best way to kill the night wolf is to do it before dark. We can't stop the conspiracy of the governor and Sigfort. He wants to destroy our Haider family, so we are about to learn from Flossie. We can find a way to procrastinate, so that the people of Sigfurs will come to accept our property when winter is approaching, and then we will kill the people sent by Sigfurs. Or a captive, and finally take our family out of Iceland in our own boat to find my uncle Hagrid. As long as we leave Iceland, we will always have a way to survive." Olaf's words made the three of Hader stunned. They thought for a long time and were silent. Hoskard is Olaf's uncle. He made a special trip to remind Hader because of his affection. Olaf was worried in his heart whether he was a spy of Sigfurs, but Icelanders have never had this kind of mind. Calm has never used this method. They all solve the problem directly and simply by fighting and killing. This is a method that has remained unchanged for thousands of years. Simple and straightforward. Icelanders even have a famous saying, "There is nothing you can't say to your friends." In the era of chaos, Icelanders' relatives and friends can share fate with life and death. If anyone chooses to betray or abandon, in the sparsely populated Nordic region, where people are acquaintances, such abandoned people cannot survive, except for being rejected. Exiled to no man's land to wait for death, there is nothing to end. This kind of pure relationship between people has been maintained until this age because of the pressure of the harsh environment and social patterns. Olaf, said Flosi, is a character in Icelandic legend. If it exists, it is also a character more than 700 years ago. Flosi's father was killed by Nile, and Flosi personally burned Nile and him. My sons, this is the most typical classic story of revenge and grievance in the Icelandic story. When Olaf said that the three of them all understood, he wanted Hader to learn from Flosi to retaliate with Sigfurs. Anyway, the huge family business can't be kept. Naturally, Sigfurs can't be cheaper. It's better to take their home. After being fooled and killed, he fled Iceland under the cover of the long winter, and went to Wendland to find Hagrid. The ancestors of Icelanders are Germans who migrated from Scandinavia. They are also known as Vikings. Icelanders with Viking genes and style are restless in their bones, so for the whole family to move away, go to the text land colonials decision hit it off quickly, and it was not like the Chinese who had a homeland complex to engage in ideological struggles. Note, mark, the currency measurement unit in the Middle Ages and before in Northern and Western Europe. 1 mark is about 233 grams. Each region and year has changed, and it seems to have stabilized to about 220 grams in the end. Chapter 5, Prestige is important. Hoskard, who is only 5.4 feet tall, looks small and thin to the Olaf family of 3, but he is a brave man who is not afraid of trouble. There was silence in the room for a while. Hoskard took the lead to get up, sipped a glass of beer, sneered, "Olaf is really a warrior. He deserves to be a descendant of Gerald. Hader, you absolutely can't match Sigf. It's not enough, it's better to kill yourself before being forced away by them. What are you doing? I can stay and help you. I can also call my son and family, and let's deal with Sigforth together." Katrin stepped forward and hugged this younger brother who was 1 inch shorter than him, and said with red eyes, "Hoskard, you are such a good person. Your heart is as kind as Frey's elf. I know you and your son, they are all proficient in long swords and long bows. It would be great if you are willing to help us." If Hoskard only told Hader news, or provided some financial help, he would have fulfilled his obligation, but he has shown that he is willing to live and die with a Hader family, which makes the 3 Hader family very excited. The Icelanders were so polite. Hader got up and patted Hoskard, and said, "I want to be friends with you forever. Hoskard, after lunch, you can bring your family, and we must plan well how to act." Hoskard nodded, and then Catelyn turned to the kitchen to prepare meals. At this time Olaf's younger brother Half and younger sister Gaelny returned, and the 2 6- and 7-year-old children began to greet their uncle after their father introduced them. Free people and poor people in Iceland generally only eat 2 meals a day. Breakfast is basically non-existent for them. They can drink at most 1 bite of roasted pea noodles or carrots. These are things that large families feed their animals, and only ordinary families can do it at noon. Eat bread and vegetable soup or eat bread and marinated fish. If you have leftovers in the evening, heat it up, eat bread if you don't have it, and drink some wine. For a landlord family like Hader, it can meet the food standard of 3 meals a day, because there are animals such as cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, etc. The Hader family can eat oatmeal, fish porridge or brown bread basically every morning. Noon is the most abundant meal for Icelanders, and Hader's family is no exception. The hostess Katrin will prepare fresh fish such as cod, whale, and mackerel. At the same time, she will also provide a variety of boiled eggs or blood puddings and smoked fish. Puffins wait and eat leftovers at night because the ocean surrounding Iceland is a place where warm currents and cold currents converge. It has been designated as one of the world's top fishing grounds in the future, so it has a huge and rich marine resources. but it is limited by the fishing technology of boats and fishing tools. Not many Icelanders can make a fortune by relying on seafood such as cod. On the contrary, many fishing boats in England will come to fish near Iceland, but also because of the backward fishing technology and tools, the development of the fishery is far less than a few hundred years later compared with the demand in the Netherlands. The oil-rich herring, the North Sea cod, capelin, etc. are less produced, and the pickling process is backward, and the response in the market is average. Therefore, Icelanders with big ships prefer to be pirates or furs. I don't like to be fishermen therefore. Currently Icelandic fishermen generally drive traditional Nordic Viking boats to fish. The fishery products are basically digested in Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Scotland and other places, and the farthest is only Norway. Therefore, Icelanders have always had a variety of fish on their recipes. Today, my half-brother came, and Catelyn heated up the smoked puffins left over from yesterday's meal. At the same time, he cooked the dried cod with 3 prawns and a piece of whale meat that was exchanged for food this morning. Served with onion and salt, the family sat in the house, facing a basin of fish meat and half a basin of smoked puffins. Olaf still sighed in his heart, and then waited until the 3 elders had each served on the plate before he filled a plate of fish soup and a piece of whale meat, then gritted his teeth and broke a large piece of black bread, soaked it in the fish soup, and ate it quickly. Half and Gailey no longer need to be fed when they were 2 years old, and now they both use a fork and a spoon to deal with the fish on the plate. The family ate silently, the soup did not make any noise, and there was no small talk. After everyone had eaten, Catelyn put away the tableware and went to the kitchen to wash. A moment later, Katrin walked back and asked about the current situation of several children in the Hoskard family. After a little chat, Hoskard stood up smiling with his sister. Hoskard kissed the faces of Olaf, Half, and Gurney with a kiss that is rarely used by Icelanders. Then he put on his hat and shook hands with Hader to bid farewell and turned around. Go to the stables, pull out his horse, and leave. After Hoskard left, Hader rushed the 2 children to Olaf and their 3 children's room to play, then took Olaf to sit down, stared at his son, and asked, Olaf, you say, what exactly should we do? Olaf shook his head in distress and said, I don't know much about the situation in Iceland and I don't know how to deal with it. However, we really can't stop the governor's guards. If he really does, we will only give in and flee Iceland, but you definitely don't want to hand over the family property, and I will never be reconciled. Even if we leave, we can't make them happy. You're right. Hader rubbed his face and snorted coldly. We will let Sigforth come to accept the land in winter, and then we will kill all his people, and then go to your uncle Hagrid. Go with it. Olaf couldn't think of a better idea. He felt that if his family fled to Vinland in North America, they would really live a primitive life. In the future, he would have to find a way to come back, not only to connect with a civilized society, more importantly, we must have revenge. Considering that he will be waiting for an opportunity to return to Iceland in a few years, he must have a bad reputation as a fugitive murderer. Olaf looked at his father and said, Father, we are the tragic people bullied and persecuted by the Sigforth family, right? Of course. Hader was angry and clenched his fists through gritted teeth. But if the governor of Iceland and the leaders at the court reverse the case 7 years ago, you will become a shame to Iceland. No one will sympathize with you. Maybe everyone will think that this governor is more just and fair. After all, most people don't. I don't know the truth. Olaf spread his hands and sighed helplessly. Hader shook his head, and said in a huff, You are right, Olaf. No one listens to our words. But many people believe what the big people say. Olaf got up a little excited and turned around, and said, So, Father, so we have to tell the matter in advance, and we have already paid too much compensation, and no longer owe Sigforth to publicity. Go out and let people outside of the Circeana Peninsula know that if most Icelanders knew about it, Sigforth and the governor might be scrupulous. Hader was a little confused. He didn't know how powerful the public opinion was. He was still questioning Olaf's words. Olaf rolled his eyes angrily, and then said carefully, If the people of Iceland knew that we had paid an extra 4,000 silver marks 7 years ago for a case that could be ended with only 8,000 silver marks, UU.com when the governor holds a court meeting to discuss the case 7 years ago, people will speak for us, but the manor and the chiefs will not sympathize with us, they will only care about the attitude of the governor. Hader frowned and looked at Olaf. Olaf whispered unhappily, The governor may not care, but the leaders will worry that they will be notorious. So as long as there are 6 or 7 people in the court meeting to be fair to us, maybe we will be fine, even if the governor presses them hard, and we may not hand over all the property. Yeah, Hader made a crisp clapping sound with his hands, and he laughed. The chiefs are all natives of Iceland, and several of them have marriages with our ancestors. If we all know that we have been wronged, someone must speak for us. Olaf, your little brain is so smart. It's as if you have drunk the water from the fountain of wisdom, the spring of Norse mythology. Hader praised Olaf, and then said, I will find something to do with us now. The leaders of the elders will tell us about our situation and ask them to be fair at the court meeting. You and your mother will take care of your younger siblings at home. If everything goes well, we won't have to pick up our ancestors' axe and gun. Olaf knew that Hader meant that he did not want to fight with Sigforth, and finally left Iceland even if someone could reconcile in the court meeting and make the governor-general and Sigfus less appetite. He would rather give up some more land. After all, facing the biggest leader of Iceland, Hader, the small landlord, didn't want to go desperately. Olaf understands his father's mentality, and he would also choose to do it if he changed it, so Olaf hopes that his father can impress some of the leaders of the manor. Chapter 6, Fight. After a while, Olaf was about to take a nap when he heard someone shouting outside. Blonde Olaf. Blonde Olaf. Olaf heard that it was the red-haired Lickstrom, and when he remembered what he said this morning, he understood in his heart that he was here to tell him to fight with children in other villages. Olaf, who has been mixed up with the children, used to be purely to pass the time. Now that I think about it, if I escape from Iceland, there must be some reliable people in my hometown. It is not easy to refuse. I went out and saw the red-haired Lickstrom and the other tall and chubby. 5 differently thin children stand together. These 5 children are also friends in the village. The shortest one is half a head shorter than Olaf. He is called Salak. His grandfather's grandfather was once a bishop in southern Iceland, and he is considered to have better family conditions among the free people. The tallest person is the little white bear Halleck. He is tall and powerful, but he is too impatient and doesn't like to use his brain, so he listens to Olaf's words very much. There are 3 other children named Yelugi, Harry, and Val. They are all children of free people in the village. Counting the redheads, the ancestors of these 6 children are slaves of the Olaf family, but now everyone is equal. Several people greeted each other, and then Olaf asked, What's wrong, Olin, the big head? They asked us to fight this afternoon. His fists are very hard. How do we deal with him? Salak was very active, and he took the lead in inquiring Olaf. Olaf thought for a while and said, I have heard of the big head Orin. He has learned to fight, but he is the only one in their village who can fight. If Eric drags him, let's knock down the other boys in their village first, that's it. But what if he asks for one-on-one? Redhead Tom said, none of us can beat Orin the big head. Olaf smiled slightly. If one-on-one, Harrick will wrestle with the big head Olympi first, and then I will deal with him. Okay. Your fighting is also very good, so that's okay. Everyone agreed and went all the way north. A few people walked through a small bush, and then walked through a wetland, and they saw a wide pasture, which belonged to Olaf's family at first, and was later distributed to the free men of his manor. Now Olaf's father still owns this piece of land. 1/3 of the ownership of the pasture. There is a flock of sheep grazing leisurely in the pasture. Olaf took a look and estimated that, except for about 70, Icelanders did not need to look after the sheep. Almost no one went to steal because they couldn't escape the law and were sanctioned. It is also difficult to hide. 3 boys in linen clothes stood not far away, staring at Olaf and his group. As a teenager who is 1 head taller than Olaf and 2 laps stronger. Even the little white bear Harrick is 1 size smaller than him. If he hadn't looked at his immature face, he would have looked like an ordinary adult male in Iceland. Olaf recognized the big man as Olin, the big head, and the 2 children behind him looked thin and small, but they all look very smart and capable. Olaf. Little Salrak. Redhead Tom. I thought you guys wouldn't dare to come. As he approached, the big head Olin laughed, looking ugly and ridiculous. Tom shook his clothes and curled his lips and said, Olin, what are you talking about? We are here to clean up you today. Aren't you self-righteous? Olaf said yes. Knock out your front teeth today. The big head Orin stared at Olaf, and said in a deep voice, okay. Come on, Olaf, let's wrestle the 2. Olaf shook his head and said, I'm not good at wrestling. We can fight. If you wrestle, let Harrick compare with you. Olin smiled contemptuously, pointed at Harrick and smiled. Little white bear, do you dare to fight with me? Halleck stared at him, rushed over and hugged Orin. Orin and Halleck instantly hug each other and force each other to fall down. The wrestling that Icelanders understand now is just to stir the legs and move the waist, and the 2 arms are fighting. Olaf and others watched the two wrestling and shouted loudly to cheer for the people in their respective villages. After a long while, Olaf estimated in his mind that it had been 10 minutes before Halleck finally ran out of strength and was thrown out by Oren, and rolled on the ground 2 laps before slowly climbing up. Haha. Olaf, are you convinced? Olin clapped his hands triumphantly. Although he was still panting, he was very confident. Little White Bear has become a ground bear. Haha. His 2 little brothers also clamored. Solrak and Tom looked at each other and smiled. Olaf took a step forward and asked, Olin, do you want to rest for a while? I think you have been chased by a sea lion as hard. Olin is now very inflated. He curled his lips and said with a cold snort, I am very strong. Only I chase sea lions. No sea lions chase me. Come on, blonde boy, let me teach you what fighting is. Olaf has the soul of an adult. Since he was young, he will not be as emotional as other Icelandic children, and his performance is too straightforward considering that this is an era in which there are various diseases, and once you get sick, you can only carry it by yourself, otherwise you can only be killed by the so-called doctor's bloodletting and amputation. Olaf has cherished his body very much since he was a child, and he doesn't need to be urged by his parents to wear clothes. Just add and subtract by yourself, eat as much food as possible, and then start consciously exercising at a very young age. Later, when he is older, he learns from his father the empty hands and the use of swords, spears, hammers, and swords, spears, and hammers passed down by the Viking ancestors. Fighting skills such as battle axe, throwing axe, bow and arrow. Because of his mature thinking and strong body, Olaf quickly mastered the family's fighting skills. According to his father Heir, if he does not count his strength, Olaf's fighting skills are almost the same as his own. If Olaf becomes an adult, he will go to sea to rob with this ability, and it will definitely be no problem to be a rich party. Olaf has a weaker body due to his underdeveloped body, low muscle content and insufficient strength, but he feels that he has no pressure to deal with 1 or 2 adults who do not know how to fight with a weapon in his hand. Olin is 15 years old this year. You reading www.you. Although Tom is not an adult in this era, he is still half a child, and Olin has also learned fighting skills since he was a child. Olaf felt that he was still struggling to deal with Oren, so he had to let Heir consume a lot of Oren's energy first. Feeling confident of victory, Olaf took 2 steps forward, moving his hands and feet through small jumps and hand swings. His boxing-like preparations and defensive movements made Olin laughed at it and laughed. Olaf is holding his hair and shaking like a chicken. Solrak, Tom, and Halleck are bright. They have seen Olaf's strange but powerful moves. They know Olaf says it's boxing, but they don't understand it. But for these kids, it's enough to know that Olaf is good at boxing. I hope you still think so when you were beaten to call your mother. Herrick, who had suffered a bit earlier, retorted, haha. I will show you how strong my Olin is. Big Head Olin laughed, and he stepped forward and punched Olaf in the nose, and shouted, Odin's meteor strike. When Olaf was in high school, he had a roommate who learned free fighting and boxing. He practiced with him for a few months. He has mastered a little bit about the footwork and defense of boxing. In this life, he learned to fight with his father. The combination of fighting knowledge made his Viking fighting skills more comprehensive. Olaf feels that he has to live before he can knock down the enemy, so his focus is to improve the body and pace of avoiding attacks, as well as the awareness and methods of defensive head. He thinks this will make Viking fighting skills more comprehensive. However, because there is not much actual combat experience, Olaf's perfection of fighting skills is still in the groping stage. Chapter 7, Plan. Oren punched with a big head. Olaf didn't panic in his heart. As soon as his footsteps slipped, Olin's fist brushed his left cheek, and he could feel the wind passing across his face. After dodging his fist, Olaf slipped and took a step forward, hitting with his left fist. Taking advantage of the moment, Oren stretched his hand away, hitting Oren's left cheek with a 10% right uppercut. It made him feel confused and took a few steps backwards, swaying like he was drunk. Although knights' duels in the Middle Ages had great influence, Icelanders were never so gentle. They never prepared handkerchiefs for duels, and they would never give up great results for the so-called gentleman spirit. Olaf is more Icelandic than the Icelanders in this article. He took advantage of the moment when Olin was hit by a punch and became faint. He strode over again, and smashed him like 2 punches, making Olin parry. He was still beaten into Pig's head with a swollen nose and swollen nose. Olaf waited until Oren lay down on the ground and screamed, and Olaf took a step back. He bent down with 2 knees in both hands, his chest heaving violently, panting heavily. Olaf is too young after all. A quick punch just overdrew his stamina. If the big head Orin could hold it for another 10 seconds, Olaf would not be able to hold it anymore. Olin's big head fell, red-haired Tom and the other 5 teenagers rushed towards Orin's 2 younger brothers with their fists, and then they had to walk back swaggeringly. Olaf rested, then walked to the big head Orin and sat down, and asked him in a low voice, "Hey, how are you?" The big head Orin opened his eyes and looked at Olaf, and said in an annoyed muffled voice, "Damn it. Why are you so powerful? Do you still have another Herod in your family?" Olaf knew Olin was convinced. Most Icelanders had a simple life, and failure in robbery in ancient times was equal to death, so they would not find reasons for their failures, but chose to admit very frankly. "Get up, Olin." Olaf smiled slightly and bent over and stretched out his hand. The smile on his face and the bright blonde hair made Olin feel a little lost for a while. Grabbing Olaf's hand and standing up, Olin, the big head, patted Olaf's unsturdy shoulder happily, grinning. "You don't have much strength, it hurts to fight." Olaf was about to speak when the church bells in the far north rang. This time the bell was struck 3 times, and after a while, 3 more times. This was repeated 3 times. "These are 3 hours today." Looking at the sun hanging down, Olaf knew that it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Because Iceland's summer nights are very short and the days are very long, people went down to the ground before the first hour. After weeding work, in the 3rd hour, it stopped working. Olin's father was the mayor and tax officer of Weir village. He was responsible for helping the governor's house collect the agricultural tax, water tax, timber tax, fodder tax, and grain tax in Weir village. Although there was no salary, it was compared free. People are decent people. Will village belongs to Sirsiana district. The leader of this district is Heir, but the 3 villages in this district are in charge of their own, and Heir does not control Will village. As soon as the 3 bells rang, Olin, the big head, became a little impatient. He said with a panic, "My father is going home from work. If he sees that I am not studying math at home, he will use a whip to slap me. Olaf, let's fight again next time." Olaf shook hands with Orin as an adult did, and then Orin hurried away. On the way, he stopped the 2 younger brothers and disappeared into the far side of the path. After Olin and others left, redhead Tom, Solik and others invited Olaf to go to the riverside to play together. Olaf was so upset at this time that he had no intention of playing, so he waved his hands and refused. Seeing Tom and others leave dejectedly, Olaf suddenly remembered that Solik had recognized a church elder as a teacher some time ago, and said that he would go to the choir to study on the weekend, so he hurried to chase after him and said with a smile, "Let's go back early today." "I knew, Olaf, you are the most loyal." Several people hugged Olaf in surprise, and then the 7 went to the river to catch fish. During the play, Olaf asked Solrak's teacher as the elder Amy of the Dagangnan district church, so he said he wanted to visit Elder Amy. Solrak immediately slapped his chest and agreed to the book. On weekdays, I took Olaf to see Elder Amy, because he will be living in the choir of the Southern District Church next Monday to study hymns. Olaf wants to alleviate the death of the Sigfus family and the governor of Iceland. This is impossible in Icelandic history. In the history of hundreds of years, people who were dealt with by the chief of Dagon and the governor were either killed or killed. Exiled to Greenland, if the leader and the governor deal with a family at the same time, the family will be sentenced to death. Olaf's countermeasures to get along were to move his family overseas to avoid, and also to seek support from other leaders. After thinking of Solrak's godfather, Olaf thought of the guidance of public opinion. Icelanders do not have a formal school and a memorable history. They are almost a wasteland of civilization. However, in the hundreds of years of history, Icelanders themselves have created poetry and articles of heroic biographical nature. These literatures are rich in content, with stories and poems. Among them, the literary carrier of narrative prose is called saga, and the literary of pure poetry is called Edda. In the 21st century, hundreds of years later, it also represents Iceland. The spiritual wealth and cultural heritage of civilization, and even Nordic civilization. Every saga and Edda are the favorite stories of Icelanders. Both adults and children can recite all the stories they have heard. Olaf's ancestor Greycloak Jarl, Harud, is a certain saga characters in UU. Reading www.uukenshu.com. Olaf thought that if he could use saga to spread his family's affairs, the people of Iceland knew that the Heir family had paid 8,000 marks and a large amount of ancestral land for Hagrid's fighting and killing. There will also be some fear that if you try to deal with the Heir family again, it will have a bad effect in Iceland, where there are no newspapers and media. How can one thing be spread quickly? Olaf thinks that it is related to saga, or written as a new saga for hundreds of years. More than 80% of saga in Iceland have been written by the most educated Catholic bishops or Christian priests, so Olaf wanted to ask Salrak's teacher Amy to help his family make a short film. Saga focuses on Heir's efforts to compensate Sigfurs and the integrity and sincerity of the Heir family, how to write, what plot to write, where to exaggerate, where to downplay, and so on. A series of questions. Olaf had ideas and thoughts when he thought of asking Amy to write saga. After all, Olaf's previous life was an old bug who had been studying for more than 10 years at a certain point. He was always involved in history and fantasy. Even if he didn't know how to write, it would help the author discover some exciting, refreshing points. It's just how to impress Amy to get him to agree. This is a matter that can only be decided after deliberation. Note, ring the bell. Before the pendulum clock was developed, the more accurate time was judged by the sundial. Ordinary people knew the time by the sound of the church bell. The church bell was struck 8 times a day, with an interval of 3 hours each time, so from around 7 o'clock in the morning. From the first bell to the 8th bell at 4 o'clock in the morning is 8 hours a day handshake. The social etiquette is customary in Northern Europe. In the south of France, it is still customary to use face-to-face and kiss-to-mouth etiquette, and handshake has not been promoted. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Visit. Time in places like Iceland is always slow and sometimes long in the summer. Icelanders will find that the day is over again during their busy work. For a child like Olaf, besides playing, he learns the fishing and hunting skills taught by his ancestors every day. Of course, if the family has the conditions, he will also go to church school to learn a little writing and mathematics that dozens of poor words in Olaf's father's stomach had long been learned by Olaf. He also learned the regular Danish language and simple Latin at the small church school on the peninsula. He had already completed his homework, so these days I stopped going to school, but started to wonder if I could find a better way to deal with the Sigford family's means to destroy their happy life. Olaf used his wisdom and all the knowledge of his previous life. Even though he thought of a way to break the situation, he couldn't use it because of his age and reality, so he could only sigh in a blink of an eye. Saturday morning, because his father Heir hadn't returned yet, Olaf told his mother Catelyn during breakfast that he was going to visit the elders of the church in Dagen South. The reason was that he wanted to go to the church school in Dagen to accept it. Higher education. After asking questions, Katrina found out that it was the godfather of Salak's child in his village, so she was relieved, took out some English shillings, probably worth half a silver coin, and handed them to Olaf, and said, "This is your tuition." "How? Can I go empty-handed? Your father is not at home, and I can't accompany you, so I will ask Yacht to take you there and ask him to say hello to Elder Amy on my behalf." After Katrin went out to find Yacht, the red-haired Tom followed Katrin in a while, and he winked and smiled. "Olaf, I also want to go to meet the world with you," my father said. "What if I can stay in Dagen and be classmates with you and Salak? He will let my brother inherit the family business and become a coachman." Olaf laughed and left the house with the red-haired Tom with a little baggage on his back. First, they went to find Salak. Then, amidst the nagging of Salak's sister, the 3 teenagers sat on Uncle Yacht's carriage. Leaving the Herit village of the White Hazel Forest, walked towards the northeast. Yacht's grandfather was still a serf of Olaf's family. Later he became a free farmer and walked very close to Olaf's family. So he intimately spread a layer of sheepskin on the car plate so that Olaf slept in the softest and most comfortable place. Warm place. Then Salrak and Redhead Tom. Therefore, the last time Salak and his son went to the Dagangnan district church, it was Yacht who drove a car, so he was familiar with the road. Olaf and the 3 talked in the swaying carriage for a while and fell asleep. When they woke up at noon, they got up and looked at the unfamiliar surroundings. Olaf asked, "Uncle Yacht, where are we going? How far is it from Dagen?" Yacht shook his whip, turned his head and smiled and said, "Olaf, are you awake? Now you are at Nishbend, and you will arrive at Dagen after 6 or 7 miles. It is estimated that you will be there 4 hours ago. If you are hungry, just eat some jerky." Yacht's eye wrinkles were squeezed together, opened a hidden compartment from the front seat, took out a deerskin bag, and handed it to Olaf. Olaf took it and opened it and saw a silver-plated round tin kettle. There were a few pieces of smoky jerky beside the kettle, weighing about 4 or 5 pounds. A pound is less than 500 grams, about 9 taels. At this time the redhead Tom and Salrak also woke up one after another. Tom shouted, "Daddy! I want to pee." "Stop." Yatra pulled the reins, waited for the carriage to stabilize, and said, "Go pee." The 3 children all got out of the car and took a pee on the side of the road. Then they sat back in the carriage. Tom took out a piece of smoked venison and broke it in half, and handed it half to Olaf. Olaf pointed to Salrak and said, "You give it to Salrak, I will take it myself." After finishing talking, Olaf took one piece by himself, broke it in half, ate one piece by himself, and handed the other piece to Yod. After eating about half a pound of smoked venison, Olaf felt a little salty, so he took a small copper kettle out of his bag and drank a few sips of water, and then laid down again. Tom and Salak, who were full of food and drink, could not sit still, and yelled at the occasional Arctic fox, Arctic wolf and reindeer animals in the scenery on both sides of the road. Olaf silently conceived in his mind how to persuade Amy I, the elder of the Southern District Church. By the time the carriage entered the villages and towns of Degen, the sky was already slightly dark, and the barks of people from far and near could be heard clearly. After a while, Yacht's carriage stepped onto a gravel road. Amidst the hooves of horses, he pointed to a church not far away and said with a smile, "The Southern District Church is here." Iceland gave up the belief in Nordic polytheism in the 10th century and changed to Catholicism. This is a manifestation of the northern barbarians and Vikings approaching civilization. Later, Iceland became a territory of the Kingdom of Norway, and after the merging of the Kingdom of Norway and the Kingdom of Denmark, it also became a place of the Kingdom of Denmark more than 30 years ago, because the Danish king gave up Catholicism and believed in Protestant Lutheranism in order to strengthen the sovereign rights. Iceland also expelled the Catholic bishops with the efforts of the governor at that time. More than 10 churches on the island were all Christians. Took over. It stands to reason that the abolition of the Catholic faith is tantamount to the complete abolition of the tithe tax. The people of Iceland should be richer than before. However, the various miscellaneous taxes levied by the governor on behalf of the kingdom have also increased, and they still suppress the people of Iceland. Can barely live Southern District Church. This 300-year-old Catholic church is now the seat of Protestantism because it was approaching the night. A candle was lit in the church, and Yacht drove the carriage to hear that the 3 children jumped down in front of the church with their baggage on their backs. A 15 or 16-year-old boy walked out of the church with freckles on his face and deep but brown eyes. He was wearing the costumes of church personnel and asked, "It's dark, I want to pray again tomorrow." Salak smiled and shouted, "Brother Yaluki. I am Salak." "Oh? Salrak is here? The elder was still talking about you just now." The young priest Yaluji squinted and smiled, looked at Olaf and Tom, and asked, "Is this your friend?" "This is the son of the leader of my village, my good friend Olaf Hadarsson. We all call him the blonde Olaf. This is my good friend Redhead Likstrom, and this Uncle Yurt is his father." Salrak hurriedly introduced everyone. After everyone shook hands and greeted everyone, Yaluji took the 4 people into the church. When they arrived at the hut behind the church, Yaluji knocked on the door and whispered, "Elder Salrak is here." A magnetic voice came out, "Bring him in quickly." "Poor child, I'm afraid I'm exhausted." Yaluji opened the door, walked in with 4 people, and then stood by after introducing them one by one. The room is covered with blankets woven by Eastern Slavs. Behind a pine table sits a middle-aged man with thin hair. He is wearing a priest's clothes and is looking through a Bible. When the 4 of Olaf come in, he smiles and nods. "Sit down quickly." Several people sat on the wooden chairs. Salrak told Olaf and Tom's intentions, and then Yacht got up to express his devotion to the Lord, then presented 2 bags of silver coins, and said with a smile, "Amy I the elders. We are willing to let our children serve the Lord Jesus. I hope you can accomplish it." Chapter 9, Go to School. After Yacht presented the silver coin, Elder Amy I's expression relaxed. Although he did not lack the money, Yacht's attitude made him very fond of him, so he asked Olaf and Redhead Tom some simple questions. Later, he accepted the 2 children with satisfaction. So that night, Olaf, Salak, and Tom stayed in the Southern District Cathedral. Because Yacht donated copper plates to the church, he exchanged for a simple dinner plus the benefits of staying in the Tongpu dormitory for one night. The next morning, after a few words with Olaf and Tom, Yacht said goodbye to Elder Amy I, and drove the carriage straight to Degen to pull some goods of wood and cloth back to the White Hazel Forest. In Lut Village, people in nearby villages and local villages who need to make clothes, repair houses, and make furniture will all ask him to buy them, which will allow him to earn some copper after yacht left. Olaf and the three under the leadership of Eulogi took a bath first, and then went to the church school behind the church. Eulogi is a student who just graduated this year. He and the deacon of the school are very familiar with him. He helped the three of them find a dormitory and then left. The church school has classes 5 days a week, and it is closed on Saturday and Sunday, so Olaf and the three of them have agreed with the yacht that he will come to pick up the three of them back to the village every Friday, and send them back to school on Sundays. The teachers in church schools are all church pastors. Sometimes Elder Amy will also teach some Bibles. Although this kind of school aims at cultivating believers, in the current era, if you want to learn regular knowledge, you must go through the church school. Olaf knew that he was too young now to have an equal opportunity to communicate with Amy. Asking him to write saga of the heir family was afraid that he would have to wait, so he settled down in the church school and lived in peace every day, learning to sing hymns, Latin and other single and boring knowledge in a blink of an eye. It was Friday. From this morning, Tom and Salik were absent-minded and looked at the door for a long time. Olaf knew that they were homesick after they hadn't left the village for a long time. By the end of the afternoon, Ut hadn't waited, but Olaf was surprised by an unexpected visitor during class in the afternoon. Eulogi walked into the classroom, stopped Olaf among a dozen children, and said, "Your father is here." Olaf followed Eulogi to the front church, and he saw his father sitting on a chair and bowing his head in prayer. "You father and son, talk." Eulogi left after speaking. Olaf took 2 steps forward, waited until his father had finished praying, and whispered, "Dad, why are you here?" Arif, Hader looked a little thin, hugged Olaf with surprise on his face, and then smiled and said, "My child, I was surprised when I went home yesterday and heard your mother say that you came to the southern church to study. What are you thinking?" Olaf heard his father's subtext, and he whispered, "Let's sit at the end, I will tell you slowly." Hader realized that he was too excited just now, and his voice was a little loud, so he smiled apologetically at the other praying believers, and ran to the corner where no one was last holding Olaf and sat down. Hader first told Olaf about his visits to other leaders. The result was really unsatisfactory. Except for Kyle, the leader of the Diupir region under the Snæfellsnes in the east, he made it clear that he would help Hader. Jeffers and the governor wanted to join forces to deal with Hader, and both found excuses to decline. After all, the Icelanders nowadays are not Viking pirates who are not afraid of life and death and power. Hundreds of years ago, hundreds of years of eating on the land have consumed the blood of Icelanders, making most of the leaders fearful of offending the governor. And Sigforth Olaf has been very unhappy since he arrived at the Southern District Church, because both teachers and others treat himself as a child, which makes Olaf, who has always been an adult, very depressed. Now sitting with his father, Olaf has recovered the feeling of being valued and treated as equals. He comforted his father first, then smiled easily and planned to let Elder Amy write the family saga, and then promoted him. The family's reputation and status made the governor and Sigforth cast a write-off. After hearing Olaf's plan, Hader thought for a while, and happily patted Olaf on the shoulder and said, "Olaf, your little head is so smart. That's right. If we can ask Mr. Pastor to write about our family's saga, that will not only make the Sigfus family and the governor jealous, but it will also make our family famous in Iceland. Whatever you do in the future will be much smoother." Olaf nodded, and Hader frowned again as he spoke, and asked in a low voice, "But where is there a legend in our family besides the ancestor Heir? There is no story to write." "Well, Amy, I agree," Olaf said in his heart. "No story to write? That's because I didn't come. I showed up early. There is a story already." With a mysterious smile, Olaf took out a small papyri book from his arms, which was interspersed with Danish and Latin to record the outline of his prepared outline. It only needs to be full of content, a family that runs through hundreds of years and has 9 generations. The epic long song will appear. Hader took it and looked over carefully. His education level is limited. He can only ask while watching. Olaf knows that his family belongs to the landlord leader level, and he has the conditions to enjoy education, otherwise Hader will be with the vast majority of Icelanders. Like Europeans, he is an illiterate who doesn't know big characters. When Hader understood the story written by his son Olaf, called the Hrut family, he was still unfulfilled, and at the same time he was shocked and speechless. After a long time, Hader slapped his thigh and said, "Olaf, you must have drunk the wisdom spring. I think what you wrote is like seeing Ada, a poem that records Norse mythology. But do you have too much fiction?" Olaf remembered the romance of the 3 kingdoms that had become popular in East Asia during the same period, so he blinked and said, Who knows about our ancestors but us? Do we say that there are any? Besides, poetry stories, it's just 3 points true and 7 points false. If it's true, no one likes to watch it. 3 points are true and 7 points are false. Hader pondered for a while. He felt that the sentence was good but he couldn't figure it out. So he shook his head and asked, "Why don't I talk to Elder Amy?" Olaf thought for a while. You reading www.youcan'tchew.com nodded and said, "Yes. But let's go together, but you have to say that this story is spread by word of mouth in our times. Otherwise Amy might not believe it." "Okay, listen to you." Hader laughed, pulled Olaf and walked towards the back door of the church. Yaluki walked out of the back door out of nowhere, frowned and asked, "What's the matter with you, Mr. Hader?" "I have something personal and want to meet Elder Amy." Yaluki smiled and said, "Elder Amy is eating. Please go if you have important things." After he said that, he shrugged and left. Hader walked through 2 corridors led by Olaf and knocked on the door of Amy's room. "Please come in." Hader and Olaf opened the door and saw Amy with thin hair eating sausage and bread, and there was a cup of steaming honey water on the table. Hader admired Amy's wealth. He was able to drink honey water. Then he performed a cross and greeted him and asked, "Sorry to disturb the elders. We have not seen each other for 3 years. You are still healthy and young? May God bless you." Amy smiled and stood up and shook hands with Hader. After all, Hader is a small leader and deserves the respect of the elders. After asking Hader to sit down, Amy jokingly said, "You have to get on your boat every year to England, Scotland, Norway, and Denmark. You did not participate in the 3-year court meeting. It seems to be a success." Merchant. "Dear Hader, I also want to be a successful businessman, but the war has made the sea more and more dangerous. Maybe soon I will return to my old business and become a Viking pirate, haha." Chapter 10, The Story of the Harrod Family. Hader exchanged a few words with Amy, and then expressed his intention. Amy felt very surprised when he heard that Hader wanted to ask himself to help compose their family's historical anthem Saga. Looking at Hader and Olaf, who were sitting steadily, Amy coughed and asked, "Mr. Hader, forgive me for being unreasonable. I don't know anything about the history of your family, and I don't think it's necessary for Iceland. Some people know that. It's not that I declined. It is really impossible to write." Hader took out a booklet written by Olaf from his arms, handed it to Amy, and said with a smile, "Sir, please take a look and then decide." After Amy took it, he flipped through it carelessly. When he saw 2 pages, his eyes widened and his face was serious. After a while, he put it away still, first glanced at Olaf, and then asked with a long sigh, "Was this written by Olaf?" Olaf's heart moved, knowing that Amy found the paper and handwriting very familiar, and thought of himself, so he stood up and said, "Yes, respected elder. My father just ordered me to record this story," he told. "Oh," Amy nodded, then leaned forward, looked at Hader eagerly, and said with a smile, "Your Excellency Hader, the story of your family already has a basic outline. Did you write it down?" Hader shook his head and said, "This is a story passed by word of mouth from my grandfather's generation, and then my father and I have added things from recent decades." Amy was a little disappointed, but he really did not believe that this wonderful story would come from Hader, who looked like an illiterate. Hader asked, "Your Excellency, do you think this story can be written? If I can't write it, I will go to other churches to find a way." Saying that, Hader was about to get up. Amy hurriedly stretched out his hand to hold him, and said in a deep voice, "God bless. Your family's story fits Icelandic saga very well. Apart from me, I think there is no Icelandic pastor suitable for writing. After all, I am a pastor who has studied at Copenhagen Cathedral for 10 years, where there is the deepest knowledge and the most elegant art." "Oh, I think so." Hader smiled and shook hands with Amy. Then the two discussed the details of how to write saga. Of course, this made the discussion of the details. Hader would ask Olaf's opinions like a father, and Olaf would pretend to be a child who loves to listen to stories, put forward some insightful ideas, which surprised Amy very much, patted Olaf on the head and smiled. "Olaf is so smart. He is my proud pupil." Olaf curled his lips secretly, thinking, pretending to be forced to slap his face, pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger, and adventures on the cliffs. "I have used a few cool writing routines. Can I still not take your little pastor who has never seen the world, because Denmark converted to Protestantism? Iceland only has Christianity. Although the pastors of the church have different beliefs from Catholicism, they all have one thing in common. That is, Civilized people in this world based on European theological civilization hold the torch of civilization, and represents a category of people at the highest level of culture. There are tens of millions of pastors. In addition to becoming saints, the only way to stay in history is to write a book. No one can resist the opportunity to be famous and make a fortune. When these two opportunities are put together, most Westerners will choose to be famous, because it's not difficult to make money by being famous. After the Renaissance emerged in Italy 2 centuries ago, Protestants who also opposed the repressive and blockade rule of the Catholic Church supported the Renaissance, and even every Protestant priest wanted to write some handed-down works like Dante Amii is no exception. He was attracted by the simple story after seeing the booklet called The Heir family handed to him by Heir. He can promise in the name of the Lord that this story is much more exciting than any saga he has seen. Amii's instinct told him that if he wrote this saga, the story of the Heir family and his own name would surely be famous in Iceland, and even in Norway and Denmark. In the process of discussing creation, time always flies quickly in a blink of an eye. It was almost night, and Yacht also drove a carriage full of goods to the church. Heir declined Amii's invitation to have dinner, and then left the church with Olaf, Tom and Salrak. The 3 children got into the carriage, and Heir drove the horse behind the carriage, and everyone accelerated to leave the university. Gangnam district, walking towards his hometown dozens of miles away. When leaving, Heir and Amii agreed that Olaf would bring back the latest manuscripts every week. After the Heir family checked the problems and points that needed to be corrected, Olaf would bring them back to me. Therefore, Olaf is now the Harut family epic story writer and material provider, but he is the real screenwriter. 3 weeks later, the first draft of the Harut family was born. It was about 100,000 characters long, and it was already considered a medium to long story in Icelandic saga. The whole story begins in 1179 in the Julian calendar and ends in 1627. It spans more than 500 years. It tells the story of 9 generations of the Harut family, but it really focuses on the first generation of Patriarch Harut. With the 3rd generation of Patriarch Odin, the 6th generation of Patriarch J.R. Harut, and the 9th generation of brothers Heir and Hagrid. The first generation of ancestor Harut is called the Grey Cloak Jarl because he once helped the King of Norway defeat the rebels in the Northern Territory during a naval battle, and then he was named Jarl, and was given a cloak. Harut is an Icelander who owns a long Viking ship and more than 50 serfs. The entire Circeana Peninsula on the south side of Degen was the manor territory of Harut. Harut's voice is very legendary, and it is a model of heroes and heroes in the most typical saga poems. When it came to Odin, the 3rd generation patriarch who also inherited the height, physical strength and swordsmanship of the Harut family, the situation changed. Odin's youth was when Iceland reverted to Norway. Odin was also a pirate. Under his management, the population of Harutstiki once exceeded 200, and he had as many as 5 Viking warships. More than a dozen small islands in the Faroe Islands were once controlled by it. The most fascinating thing in Odin's story is that he has seen a plesiosaur monster and a big lanternfish in the sea, as well as a beautiful mermaid who can sing. The 6th generation of Patriarch Ziohelid is called Ziohelid because he is full of blonde hair, tall, handsome, and excellent in martial arts, and is honored as the person most like the ancestor of Helot. Iceland, in the era of Little Growth, has changed a lot from before. Most of the serfs in the manor have become free people. Villages have begun to appear on the peninsula. After being an adult, Little Growth still imitated his ancestors and went to sea by boat and arrived in Greenland, and then arrived in Wenland, where he conquered several tribes of Skrellan savages and Unipid apes, and lived for a long time. Once in the kingdom war between Wenland and the Skelland savage, Little Harut was defeated and almost killed. After chasing into the cliff, he ran into an old white-bearded grandfather. The fairy fruit presented by the old grandfather recovered from his injuries, and at the same time received a magic soldier who cuts iron like mud. After the Little Harut went out of the valley, his martial arts greatly increased, relying on the magical soldiers to defeat the army of the Skelland savages, successfully rescued his men, and prepared to return to Iceland together. It's a pity that the ship encountered a big storm on the sea. In order to pray for the wind and rain to calm down, Little Harut threw the sword in his hand to the sea god, and the wind and waves subsided. Little Harut and his party returned to Iceland unscathed. Whether it is Olaf, Heir, or Amii, they all know that for Icelanders, the story of Harut and Odin is a regular saga model. Some people may like it, but they can't surpass it. The story of Little Harut has a breakthrough in the deeds of the first 2 legendary ancestors, strange, dangerous and mysterious adventures, the legendary rich and fertile Wenland, the grandfather under the cliff, and the iron-cutting man. The story of the Excalibur, the request of the sea god, etc. interspersed with each other to move people's heartstrings is the story of Heir. Since childhood, every reader will have a sense of intimacy and love for the Heir family, but Olaf's real bomb in the story is the 9th generation of Heir and Hagrid brothers. Olaf's plot and Amy I's writing make the story of the Heir and Hagrid brothers even more exciting. The first half is a story of a tragic hero. The two brothers Heir and Hagrid, one person and one Kirk ship, went out to plunder merchant ships while fighting for the great cause of the Icelandic people, replacing wood, flour and beer with fur. There were also peculiar experiences along the way. For example, they encountered sea lions and walruses that could talk, humans and huge whales that were thousands of meters long. More importantly, the two brothers met gypsies who knew fortune-telling in Sweden. It is concluded that Hagrid is in danger of killing after all, but if he imitates the footsteps of his ancestors, he will become a hero and even rebuild his home called New Iceland. Heir also has disasters, but the catastrophe of the door will be destroyed 10 years after Hagrid's disaster. Reading www.uucanchu.com will have a nasty seagull monster that will control the brains of the big man and harm the Heir family. If Heir is killed, Hagrid will return to Iceland with an army of revenge. After the two brothers returned home, they met the son of the Sigfus family. Hagrid and the little Sigfus fought for the daughter of the leader of the Dagangbai district. As a result, Hagrid, who is strong in martial arts, and who is tall and strong, killed the little Sigfus, and then Hagrid, who didn't want to be killed, left Iceland and took his crew on a wonderful sailing adventure. They went to the real India and saw an elephant riding a battle. The Indian army also went to Daming and saw the roots of the powerful and prosperous Eastern civilization. They went to Japan, Ryukyu, North Korea and other countries to see the special tribute system of the mysterious Eastern Celestial Cultural Circle, which is in line with Western Catholicism or Christianity. The true disclosure of the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty, which is completely different from its religious civilization and culture, is fascinating and shocking at the same time. Heir, who stayed in Iceland, compensated the Sigfus family for a large amount of property. The story reflects Hagrid's adventure through the treasure given by a wizard named Zhang Sanfeng in the Heavenly Dynasty, the 1,000-mile sound transmission talisman. This talisman can transmit sounds to thousands of miles away. So Hagrid told Heir about his experience after seeing the splendor and mystery of the Far East. Hagrid took his fleet to the mainland near Winland, where he lived and imitated the fertile land near Winland by his 6th-generation ancestor. Established a base area on the land, and at the same time conquered the savages as slaves, and became the leader of the ruled area for thousands of miles. The story of the Heir family is over here, but there's a blank space. It seems that I want everyone who hears and sees this story to imagine the beauty of Winland. Chapter 11, Heir famous in Iceland. After more than a week of deliberation and revision, the final version of the Heir family is released. After the book was written, Amy urged other pastors and teachers of the church to transcribe 7 or 8 copies, and then gave them to elders in Dagen and other areas within a week. The story of the Heir family was first circulated among Protestants, and then slowly publicized. After another week, the story of the Heir family has become the hottest topic for most people in Iceland, and it has become more and more popular. At the beginning of the 17th century, Iceland had a population of only 50,000 to 60,000, and it has not changed much for many years. The large area and the lack of migration and flow of people have caused information to be blocked. Therefore, the previous year I learned that King Christian IV of Denmark represented the Protestant Union country. When the war against the Holy Roman Empire was launched, this important news has been discussed by the people of Iceland for more than 2 years. But in late July and early August of 1627, the story of the Heir family became another topic in Iceland that surpassed the Great War in Europe, and it was talked about, and its influence grew. Many Icelanders have gone to visit Heir in the village of Herid in the White Hazel Forest, wanting to learn about the real legendary heroes Herid, Odin, the descendants of little Herid and the brother of the explorer Hagrid. Heir was a little proud at first, and slowly rushed to get bored, but Olaf told him that before the court meeting, every Icelander who came to the village must have a good impression of the Heir family, so as to accumulate word of mouth. Hatter therefore became more and more enthusiastic about every Icelander who came to the village. After leaving, every Icelander who came to the village would praise the heroic descendant Heir for his boldness, kindness, lofty and mighty power. Many people who were suspicious of the story of the Heir family believed that when Heir was more than 6 feet tall, they believed most of them. After all, the 1.9-meter big man lacked resources in this era, and the local marriage and marriage era in Iceland is already a rare giant. It can be said that the entire Icelandic population of more than 50,000, Hader's height is already 80% ahead of the people. The leaders that Hader had visited before were afraid of the governor's power and dared not speak for him, but after the price of the Heir family spread throughout Iceland, these leaders changed their tunes and sent their families to tell Hader that in the next months in the court meeting, if the governor and Sigfoth want to reacquire Hader's guilt, they will speak for Hader and will definitely not allow Hader to be bullied. Olaf and Hader's mood changed to lightened. They felt that Sigfoth and the governor could no longer deal with them. Hader contacted people from various regions in the village every day. Some were acquaintances, and some did not know him. Olaf has become very popular in the church school, because the popularity of the Hrut family in Iceland has brought a huge reputation to Amir. He reciprocated, and he took more care of Olaf, and he has made it clear that Olaf it was his most proud student relationship, and took Olaf to meet several church elders and deacons. After understanding, Olaf learned that the elder of the church in Dagangby district, Hongrad, was an aristocrat sent from Copenhagen, Denmark. The family of Hongrad was appointed by Christian IV to be responsible for the affairs of the Danish East India Company. In 1620, it occupied the Darankaba area of southern India and developed colonial smuggling of tea and sugar. It is currently booming. Olaf knew that this is the golden age of the great nautical era. Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark are vying to establish the East India Company to establish a stronghold in India. At the same time, Spain is colonizing Central and South America, and Britain and France have just started in North America. A stronghold was established in the Americas. Olaf has always wanted to keep up with the east wind of maritime colonization and make his family rich. After all, the soul of a modern person cannot bear the boring life in Iceland, lack of materials, and lack of spiritual entertainment. Olaf also wants to build a career, whether it is to master the power of the army or the money of the merchant ship. Olaf remembered him after he met Honrad, and planned to let his father buy him some matchlock or musket in private. After all, he was targeted by the governor and the Sigfoth family, and Olaf felt that he had nothing in his hand. The gun is too unsafe. After returning home in Jot's carriage on Friday night this week, Olaf took an opportunity to tell his father Hader was sitting on a stool wiping his whaling spear, and said with a smile, "Olaf, what you said is right. We offended Sigfoth. This is very dangerous for us. Before Governor Colliswin leaves Iceland, we will all. There is still a crisis of family destruction. Buying some muskets is a means of self-defense, but I am more familiar with businessmen in England, and the arquebuses they sell to me should be cheaper." "No. Father, you have always had business dealings with merchants in England, so this time you can still trade if you buy or not, but if we don't take this opportunity, we may not be able to contact Hongrad's family again. Dad, you may not. I know that the East India Company controlled by the Honrad family has 5 armed merchant ships, which control the tea and sugar business in India and are Denmark, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. Although it has not revealed any special features just after opening the route, as far as assets and strength are concerned, they are definitely one of the most powerful forces in Denmark. It will also be an indispensable way for the Kingdom of Denmark to come to money in the future. If we hang up with them, it will be useful in the future. This is an investment, Dad." Olaf's words moved Hader. He pondered for a moment and said, "I'll park the boat in the middle of the Shorso River to deal with the boat maggots as you said. I will run one less route this year, but this year our flocks have had a good harvest. You can also sell 1 or 200 mark silver coins. You reading www.uucanchu.com is enough to discuss business with Hongluod." Hader left the house the next morning, looking for someone to handle his flock and a few calves. That night, Hader brought the sheep merchants to the house to pull sheep, and then the sheep and calves were driven by the merchant to the coast a few miles away to board the ship. Hader sat back into the room happily holding a small box of silver coins. Katrin took out the hot food and gave it to Hader to eat. Then took another bottle of wine and opened it to him. After eating and drinking, Hader hiccuped and looked at Olaf. "Tomorrow morning, let's go to Elder Hongrad and see how many musket bullets can be bought for our house's 160 mark silver coins." Catelyn just put the 2 little guys, Half and Jelny, to sleep, and walked into the room to see that her husband was a little bit sour at his second son's words, and snorted coldly, "Hey. You listened to Olaf's words, when? Can you listen to me too?" Hader laughed. "Olaf is a child possessed by our ancestor spirits, the hope of the future family. He was born to you. Is my good to him the same as my good to you?" Katrin also laughed. "You are right. All of my children are handsome and tall. You see, Olaf is only 23 years old this year, and he is almost as tall as you. Olaf will also be in the future. As tall and handsome as Olaf, yes. Half and Galni will grow up to be big boys and tall beauties. Hader was very happy, hugged his wife and said, "We will have some good children in the future." Katrin gave her husband a blank look, broke away from his sturdy hand, pulled up Olaf, and said, "Go, Olaf, go back to the room and sleep." Olaf felt that his family was very warm, so he kissed his mother. "Okay, Mom and Dad also go to bed early. Good night." Chapter 12, Firearms. The next morning, Hader and Olaf got up before dawn, brought some dried meat and hot water, and rode the crossbred Sharma and an old horse to Dagon. Hader's superb riding skills is also a top-notch figure in Herat village. Olaf has the heart to learn, and this time he mastered the basic skills under the guidance of his father. When he was on the way, the old horse that Olaf rides is docile and is a castrated animal, so it is most suitable for beginners to ride. When they first came out of the village, the two horses rode slowly on the road. After Olaf became more proficient, the two horses trot because he went out early. Hader was not anxious. He taught Olaf the technique patiently on the road, while riding a horse to observe. Olaf's height and weight are now close to that of an average adult, so he has good physical strength, and his intelligence is at the level of a later adult, who has withstood the college entrance examination, so he has made rapid progress in learning to ride a horse. When the father and son arrived in the village on the south side of Dagon, they heard the church bell ringing in the distance. Olaf wiped the sweat from his face and let out a sigh. "It's been more than an hour." Hader glanced at the rising sun, raised his whip, and said, "It's not far, let's go." Olaf estimated that after another hour, the two passed through the main street of Reykjavik, the most prosperous city in Iceland, and arrived in front of the cathedral in the north. And Europe is still in an era when farming, medicine, and culture lag behind those of the east. The technology of agricultural planting is primitive, and the average grain output per mu is less than 1/5 of the ancient eastern countries. Iceland is even more backward in Europe, so there is only one city in Reykjavik on the huge island. Although Reykjavik is called a city, it is actually a more prosperous village and town. In the eyes of Hader, who has seen the world, it only has more large houses than the Hazel Grove Herat village, and there are several taverns and shops. Far less prosperous and wealthy than London. But for most Icelanders who have no chance to travel far, they have only seen their own villages and neighbors' villages, which are nothing more than stone houses and wooden houses. In comparison, Reykjavik has wide streets and tall houses. More importantly, there is a wharf, where boats stop every day. Sailors carry food, wine, leather goods, wood, farm tools, swords and other items up and down. In the central area on the east side of the wharf, there is a tavern that combines a brothel, a hotel, and a restaurant, and further east there is the central governor's house with the right of Iceland. In the 3 streets surrounding the governor mansion live the highest and most affluent leaders in Iceland. Every Icelander who sees the 3-story stone governor's mansion will envy and say, "The royal palace in Copenhagen is nothing more than that." Olaf sighs. Reykjavik is also at the level of a wealthier village or an ordinary town in the later Celestial dynasty. The so-called prosperity can't attract him at all. Reykjavik is divided into 3 districts. The southern district and the northern district are filled with freelance coolies and the largest population. The eastern district, directly east of the wharf, is where the governor's house, shops, and residential areas are concentrated. Crossing the main street, the pedestrians on the street became scarce. Hader tied the horse in front of the church, and then led Olaf into the North Church. Today is Sunday. The church has just finished a mass. The believers in the church filed out. Hader and Olaf stood by and waited until everyone was gone before entering. There are 2 priests in the church tidying up magical instruments. On the high platform, a man with the appearance of an elder in a white robe is giving orders. Hader and his son stepped forward. Hader drew a cross, bowed slightly, and said in a respectful tone, "Hader, the lost lamb in Herat village in the white hazel forest, come and feel the grace. The Lord will tolerate his children and bless his followers." Mr. Hader, the white-robed man, has brown hair and is about the same age as Hader, but he has to get a short punch. He first sternly painted a cross on his chest, then turned his head and asked, "Olaf, what is your relationship with Mr. Hader?" Olaf bowed slightly, greeted him and explained, "This is my father, Elder Hongrad." Hongrad was stunned and smiled and shook hands with Hader, and said, "I remember, Mr. Hader is the brother of our great Icelandic explorer Hagrid. I have heard about the deeds of the Herat family a long time ago." Feeling the kindness of Hongrad, Hader coughed slightly. Icelanders are not afraid of wind and waves, and love adventure. This is the character bestowed by our ancestors. Elder Hongred, I am here today to find you for business. Since it's a business talk, let's go to my office and talk, Hongred said and invited Hader to a room with a reindeer head, a medieval sword and a golden cross. Hader complimented him and sat down. The two exchanged a few words about the furnishings in the house. Hongred looked very interested and gave Hader a glass of wine. After a while, Hader put down his wine glass and turned to the topic, Elder Hongred. You also know that I have a merchant ship. In the past 2 years, the Protestant Alliance and the Catholic supporting Holy Roman Empire have fought, and the whole of Ibero has become a mess. Some of the mercenaries who were defeated in the war and the peasants who could not survive have become pirate robbers. I want to protect my ship's property. When you visit this time, you want to buy some muskets, don't you know if you have them? Although Hong Luod is a clergyman, he is also an excellent businessman. He was originally the successor cultivated by the family. Later, in order to maintain religious support for the family, he resolutely converted and became a clergyman, relying on the support of the family. In just 5 years, he moved from pastor to deacon and then sent out to serve as elder in northern Iceland. As long as he accumulates a few more years, he can operate and be transferred back to Copenhagen Cathedral as elder. When seeing Hader Olaf and his son, Hongred keenly realized that the two came to buy weapons. After all, whether it was 8 years ago or the story of the Harrod family, you read www.can't.com all explained that Sigfus had hatred with the Hader family. Moreover, Sigfus, who had hung up on the governor, had indeed let out a word to turn the Hader family into his serfs. Hongred knew that Hader must buy some muskets for self-defense, and he might fight with Sigfus, but he has no friendship with Sigfus, as long as he can make money and do what they do, a thought in his mind. Hongluo smiled and asked cheerfully, this is the time of war. Under His Majesty Christian's personal conquest, Denmark has taken down several areas in northern Germany and is about to defeat the Holy Roman Empire and become the savior of the Protestant country, so the muskets and ammunition produced by the Norwegian and Danish arsenals have to be sent to the front lines. I can't do it because it's treason, Olaf whispered secretly. He didn't know if Hongred understood. In fact, in the second half of last year, Christian IV was beaten up by Warnerstein, the commander-in-chief of the Holy Roman Empire. This year is even more violent. The defeat had already vomited out the occupied territory, and it would take a long time to face a big defeat. He didn't expect that Hong Luod would still brag about King Dan's merits here. Olaf knows the direction of history, neither Hongred nor Hader knows. Hader knew that Hongred might not refuse to say this, there must be something to follow, so he smiled and waited for the following. Hongred praised Hader calmly, and said to his heart, as expected of the head of the Harrod family, however, Britain and France are now our Danish allies. The two countries have always supported a lot of gold and silver, as well as bows, spears, and muskets. If you really want some, I think you can send them from England to Copenhagen. Some of the guns were deducted and shipped to Iceland, but the price was higher. Chapter 13, Shiangwangkewu. Icelanders generally do not have a meeting price in the process of buying and selling, but Hader, who owns a merchant ship, is obviously not included. After a simple bargaining with Hong Luod, you can get a matchlock gun for 15 silver marks, and a pack of lead bullets and gunpowder for half a mark. Hader bought 10 matchlock guns and 5 boxes of ammunition, and paid a deposit of a box of mark silver coins. Iceland has no standard currency. There are British silver pennies and shillings in a box of silver coins, and there are golden Rhine shields. This thing looks like gold, is actually not high in content, and it is also used as silver coins. Hongred calculated it for a long time, and Olaf estimated it would have an hour in the end. Hong Luod counted a box of silver coins and gold coins plus 160 marks. Then he calculated for a while, rubbing his forehead, and said, I will charge you 160 marks as a deposit, a total of 180. Mark, I am writing to send someone to Copenhagen. It will take a month at the earliest. Olaf lightly kicked his father's heel. Hader got up and shook hands with Hongred. Happy cooperation. Elder Hongred. After the two agreed on a time, Hader said goodbye and left. The father and son first ate some dry food, then Hader sent Olaf back to the Southern District Church School, and then left. Today is Sunday. Olaf's roommates Tom, Solek, and Zeremi, the child of another Dagon local businessman, will not come back until the afternoon. Olaf, after meeting his teacher Amy I, followed Pastor Yuluji to do miscellaneous tasks, preparing for Sunday Mass. After a series of activities such as prayer, sacrament, hymn, etc., Olaf also felt tired. He drank a glass of grape juice, ate a few mouthfuls of pancakes, and went back to the dormitory to take a nap. When I woke up, the 3 roommates all came back one after another. Olaf returned to the boring missionary school life here, but he gritted his teeth while studying hard. After all, he was too young to do many things on his own. As long as he waited 5 or 6 years, he was 10 years old. After the age of 6, you can be valued by people and accomplish many things independently while attending classes and singing chants every day. Olaf is also thinking about some ways to make a fortune. This is what he has attached most importance to. In recent years, Iceland is limited by its small population and low productivity. In fact, apart from geothermal resources, which can soak in a hot spring, there is almost no way to get money. From around the 10th century to the present, Icelandic walruses have been hunted and killed by Icelanders because of their precious ivory. Before the Black Death spread, Icelanders were able to live well by exporting rare animal skins and walrus tusks. But now that the population of Europe has been greatly reduced, and years of war have allowed countries to invest funds in recruitment, munitions, shipbuilding, colonization, etc., the demand for luxury goods has greatly reduced, and of course Iceland cannot provide it. As a result, the current Icelanders rely on the rich seafood resources of the North Sea and the sheepskins on the island to survive, and they have to pay various taxes and fees not lower than those collected during the Catholic period. Olaf knows very well that his father has to pay taxes when he sells sheep, and when the grain grows up, he will pay taxes and fees. Basically, this year's field output can be taxed by deducting the rest of the ration. If you want to make real money in Iceland, apart from the development of planting and breeding, you can only increase fishery income. However, agriculture relies on advanced planting management techniques, and fisheries relies on advanced boat tools, as well as storage and preservation and pickling. Follow-up question: neither of these problems can be solved by Olaf. In fact, in Europe today, if there is a ship with startup capital and courage, it is most profitable to go to the Far East to run a business, but the prerequisite is to seek the consent of the 3 countries of Britain, the West, and the Netherlands, and pay sufficient protection fees. Otherwise, control the Far East business. The armed merchant ships of the 3 kingdoms can be pirates at any time. Olaf measured his age and family funds, and finally gave up the possibility of running a business overseas, instead focusing on agricultural development. Several continents and countless nation-states are ranked first in agricultural cultivation, and it is undoubted that the distant ancient country of the East ranks first in any century is still the Ming dynasty of the Heavenly Kingdom, leading Europe several times in agriculture alone. Olaf had studied civil servants in his previous life and learned a lot of knowledge about history and politics when preparing for the exam. So he remembers that the Ming dynasty gave birth to 3 collections of biotechnology categories, namely Li Shizhen's Compendium of Materia Medica, Su Guangqi's Nongzheng Quanshu, and Song Yingxing Heavenly Creations. Olaf remembers that these 3 books in history were introduced to Europe 100 or 200 years later. At that time, Xiang Guangkai's iron-making and fire-making bellows helped Europe open the door to the Industrial Revolution, raising silkworms, planting, spinning, and making sugar. The ceramic lamp industry has also been rapidly improved, but the contemporary Qin dynasty was still surrounded by the aura of the prosperity of Kangxi and Qianlong. The old man Shiquan even listed Xiangong Keiwu as a banned book, so that it became clear hundreds of years later. Engraved plates can only be seen in Japan. Olaf knows that he is the only one who can understand Chinese characters in all of Europe. As long as he can ask British merchants to bring these 3 books back, he will study them slowly and take them out bit by bit. Sooner or later, he can become the richest man in Iceland and Northern Europe. The richest man, even the richest man in Europe. Olaf is well aware of the value of these 3 books. They are the crystallization of the wisdom of an ancient civilization of 5,000 years. If they are translated and disseminated by themselves, Europe's backward agriculture, heavy industry, and light industry will soon be completely upgraded by 1 or 2 grades. Faster to catch up with the East. Of course, Olaf will not do this. The first is the remaining intense love for the ancient Eastern country. He hopes that Daming will be strong. Secondly, Olaf did not do him any good. There are also prescriptions in Compendium of Materia Medica, and Olaf thinks that it is enough to be used by European doctors who will be bleeding after victory. This will not only make money, but also guarantee his own life. Nongzheng Quanshu can increase planting yield. As long as you learn, your family's more than 24,000 acres of arable land can increase the yield by 2, 3, or even 3 or 4 times. This is the increase in annual income. Over time, it only depends on planting. You can become a monopoly, not to mention Heavenly Creations, This encyclopedia is the supreme program to enhance the foundation of agricultural and industrial development, and as long as you get it, you can change the situation in Europe. Olaf feels that he must get these 3 books. The only way to buy these 3 books is to rely on Britain, Spain and the Netherlands, the United Republic of the 7 provinces of the Netherlands. But Olaf's family is too far away from Spain and the Netherlands, and there are no relatives or friends. Heir is only familiar with the businessmen in England, so Olaf couldn't bear it and wanted to go home quickly, and asked his father to ask the British businessmen to buy a batch of Ming books. Reading www.uucanchu.com. After a few days of suffering, it finally arrived on Friday afternoon. The 3 children who were looking forward to hearing the familiar copper bells and horse neighs while scrubbing the floor, it was Jort who came in the evening. When it was just night, Jort drove the carriage to take Olaf and the 3 back to the village. Olaf and Solrak got out of the car and went home. Entering the house, half with a pale blonde hair and Galni, who is close to white hair, cheered and hugged Olaf. "Oh, my dear brother and sister. Do you miss your brother?" Olaf rubbed the hair of the 2 younger siblings that only reached his chest, and said relaxedly, half had thick eyebrows and big eyes. The corner of his eyes left a small scar because of mischievous knocks. He admired a second brother who had beaten the village invincibly. He was very curious about the outside world. He asked, "Brother, you are not at home?" "Elrond, the kid in the next village, they bullied me. I can't beat him. I'll talk to Halleck. You will find him if you have something to do." Olaf smiled and patted half on the shoulder with a cheer, half opened his hand and said, "If Brother Halleck can help me, I will beat Elrond and the others." Galni's 2 eyes were big and round, and the sky blue eyes looked like pure vet magical. She inherited the gentleness of her mother and touched Olaf's face softly and asked, "Brother Olaf, why are you losing weight? I miss you so much." This week Olaf was immersed in the conjecture of the science and technology readings of the Far East, so he didn't think about it. He smiled and hugged his sister, patted his shoulder, softly relieved, "My brother misses you too. Galni, do you have a good time? Eat." The moonlight shone at the door, stretching out the 3 figures of brother and sister Olaf. Chapter 14, Thor and number 039, S-Hammer. Brothers and sisters were talking. The Hatters heard the sound, pulled Olaf back into the room, and took out the warm food for him. When Olaf was full, Catelyn saw that he had something to say, so she hugged Hafengurni and went to the back room. Olaf drank hot water and looked at his father, and found that he was a little absent-minded, and smiled. "What's wrong with you, Dad?" Heir rubbed his hands, his face changed slightly, and his throat said dumbly, "I was notified this morning. The 10th of next month will be the day when the governor will hold today's court meeting. I am afraid that it will happen. Don't be nervous, Dad." Olaf also sank, thought for a while, and whispered, "Blessed by the story of the Hrut family, Lord Callus won't dare not move you, and other leaders will do it too. Let's talk. I don't think there's any problem. But Corsvan is the illegitimate son of the first king, and His Majesty Christian's half-brother. Even if he has no status rights, he should not be offended. If he does not care about the influence, he must help Sigforth to get ahead. Can the leader stop it? It's not impossible." Heir was a little worried. Olaf heard the words and thought about it. Although he thought it was unlikely that the governor would stand up for Sigfurs, everyone in Iceland knew that Sigfurs's daughter was very popular with her husband Karlsvin. Joy, if the pillow wind blows well, it's not impossible. I thought of waiting another 3 weeks for the Hongred family to send 10 muskets. In addition to the 2 old-fashioned arquebuses, the Olaf family had 12 muskets and swords. There are dozens of weapons such as axe and hammer, as well as leather armor, horned helmet, and worn-out plate armor. Olaf feels that if the governor really does desperately against his family in the court meeting next month, it will only be broken after all. Since his rebirth, Olaf has been thinking about doing a big business. 8 years ago, he pretended to be a ghost and fooled Uncle Hagrid to North America. It was not that he consciously guided him to colonize and open up Wasteland. In fact, Olaf also subconsciously wanted to grow up. The idea of American colonization and even nation building, if the governor really does it, Father. Let's behave as if Sigforth was insulted as we said before. When Sigforth sent people to collect the floating wealth, we would kill them all in one go. The men, women, and children in the village were threatened and sailed out to sea to go to my Uncle Hagrid. Olaf's childish face trembled with excitement, but his eyes were firm and enthusiastic, so that Heir also puffed up a wave of heat in his chest, and shouted, "Okay. In case Sigforth and the governor don't let us survive, I'll do it, but we need to plan early. Tomorrow, I will ask your mother to find you Uncle Kadir and Uncle Hoskid, and then talk to Yod and Hudic in advance. When the day comes, let's try to do it quickly. Can't let go alone. Yod and Hader are self-confident. They are the strongest and most able-bodied men in the village. Hader is the leader of the village. Yod is considered the number 2 man. Therefore, in case of murder and arson, it is almost a rebellion. Hader has to discuss with Yod, so that he will have a psychological preparation in advance to plan. Hudic is the chief officer, archer and whaler of the Hader ship. He is an old man who has followed Hader for many years. This man is a mercenary in the Schwyz region of Switzerland. He has been active on the battlefields of wars in various countries with a corps later. In 1612, the current Danish king Christian IV enlisted the army to launch a fortified battle of Kalmar and captured the Swedish city of Kalmar. Within a few months Hudic was injured and dying during the war. He was rescued by Hader, who was transporting supplies to the front. The two forged a deep friendship. After the war, Hudic applied for retirement and was invited to Iceland to do it. Dahl's deputy captain Olaf Hadarsson knew their deep friendship with his father Hader's hardcore brothers, so he stopped talking when he heard his father's decision, but went to sleep. Some of the tossing Hader brought dry food early the next morning, rode horses to find Yod, and then the two rode one by one to the upper reaches of the Shorso River in the northeast. Hader's more than 50-meter-long Kirk ship was parked in the upper bend of the Shorso River and was taken care of by Hudic and a sailor. Hader and Yod are both old riders with excellent riding skills. They rushed all the way and arrived at the river bend that night. There was a layer of mist on the water, but the familiar Thorhammer merchant ship could be seen vaguely. Seeing Thor's hammer, both Hader and Yod felt relieved, and then yelled. Hudic, a yellow-bearded man with a sword scar on his cheek holding a bow and arrow on the boat, flashed like a falcon, and his forearm muscles were loose. After looking for a while, he saw Hader and Yod riding horses appearing from the woods. The corners of his mouth curled slightly, and he put away his bow and arrow. A moment later, Hader and Hudic, who boarded the deck, gave a cordial hug. The sailor Hilter put away the springboard, and Yod stepped forward and shook hands with Hudic. After a few words of greeting, the three of them walked into the cabin and sat down. Hader patted the young sailor Hilter on the shoulder and smiled and said, "Little Hilter, you are the kid I picked up from England, but you are very smart. I believe you have learned a lot of skills from your teacher Hudic. Work hard, and wait a few years for me to help you marry a woman." Hilter, who is only 20 years old, is stuttering. He blushes, babbles and talks, and then gestures for assistance in excitement. Hader, Yod, and Hudic laughed, and then told Hilt to get the wine. After the three of them drank a bottle of wine, Hudic and Yod also knew Hader's plan. Hudic did not have a family and was not an Icelander. He was very in favor of Hader's decision. "I have long heard that there is gold everywhere in the continent of America. Wherever we can reclaim the land, we must be able to occupy a place with our ability." Hudic laughed and patted the quiver on his waist. Yod seemed to be honest, but in fact he was just not good at talking. He had a good idea in his heart. After thinking about it, he narrowed his eyes and said, "You don't know Hudic. Hagrid occupied a place in Wenland 8 years ago. If we go, we will go to Wenland." "Okay." Hudic looked at Hader in surprise, as if surprised by his layout. Hader smiled bitterly and said in a deep voice, "Back then Hagrid went out to escape, and I couldn't reveal his whereabouts. Now I ask Elder Amy to write Sakia in order to save his life. I'm afraid the Icelanders know it." Yod told Hudic about the situation. Hudic laughed, took another sip, and said with a blushing face, "With Brother Hagrid in Wenland, we will be safe. But I heard that Yamati there are Indian savages on Liga Island." You reading www.uucanchu.com is the Skellerland people referred to by the Icelanders. Although these people are primitive and barbaric, but there are a large number of them. If we want to operate for a long time, we still need to bring more people. What? I thought about it all night last night. If it's time to do it, as long as Sigfus sends people to Harrod village, please follow me to kill the Sigfus family, and then we will take it with you. All the villagers in Harrod village leave Iceland and take this Thorhammer to Vinland. If the villagers don't want to leave, we will persecute them." Hader's face was uncertain, his tone hesitant. Hader said a word. There was no sound in the cabin, only a faint breath. After a long time, when Hudic almost couldn't bear to stand up and ask Yod to express his position, Yod sighed and gritted his teeth. "If you want to confiscate your property, it may not only come from the Sigforth family. Governor, the guards and tax officials of the government will also come. We will kill these people and the village will be affected, so it is better to leave the whole village. Hader, you are the leader, and the Harrod family is the master of everyone's ancestors. We must stand with you in the sense of reason. The old brothers in the village, let me say that it doesn't matter if the elderly, women, and children, but most of the men in charge are definitely reluctant to leave. If you want to do this, you will have to promise more benefits and disperse some gold and silver. Yote's statement instantly made the cabin atmosphere warm, and soft. Hader patted his chest lightly and assured, "Yacht, don't worry, I will distribute Chundu this year to everyone. When you arrive in Vinland, you will be allocated twice as much land as you have in Iceland. You can do that. Can it work?" Yote's brows stretched slightly, and he nodded. "With this condition, I can say it with some confidence. Let's first say hello to the dozen or so people we have the best relationship with, and then the rest will be overwhelmed by them that day." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, Uncle. 2 weeks later, Olaf continued the monotonous and boring life of the mission school for the past 2 weeks. However, he may not be able to see Hader when he comes home every weekend. Occasionally, when he sees him, he also finds that Hader is wiping him. He has a warhammer, a long knife, and honed his physique and martial arts in the early morning. Olaf clearly felt that Hader was preparing for the upcoming court meeting, preparing for the worst. This kind of precautionary feeling makes Olaf very fond of him. He feels that his father is very reliable and possesses many qualities of a successful person. Iceland entering August is the warmest time of the year. Although you still have to cover with a thick fur quilt at night, you only need to wear a thicker robe during the day. Compared with the severe cold before June and after October, August is the warmest. After school on Friday, Olaf was taken to a village in the North District by his father, who came to Dagen. He walked into a dark stone house. Hader called out, and a thin, short man with black curly hair walked away. "Come out, laugh and hug Hader, my dear brother-in-law. You finally came." Olaf's uncle Hoskild turned his head and hugged Olaf, said with a smile, "I heard that Olaf went to school in the Southern District Church School, and I wanted him to come as a guest. Are you still used to carrying your child in the church school?" Olaf already knew that many years ago, his grandfather died when he went to sea as a pirate. Grandma took her mother, Katrin, and his uncle Hoskild to remarry, and later gave birth to a young son. Kadir lives in Grey Mountain Village in the northeast of Herod Village in the White Hazel Forest. Because he inherited his father's position, he is the leader and tax collector of this small village, and his status is not much worse than that of Hader. The relationship between the two younger brothers and the eldest sister Katrin is very good, and they are even closer to brother-in-law Hader, so they are also people who can be trusted by the Hader family in Iceland. Olaf answered a few questions from his uncle politely, and then Hoskard's two sons also walked out to meet with Hader and Olaf. Hoskard had 4 children, but 2 of them died. Now his 2 sons have grown up, and they have followed him in Dagen. The eldest son Kalm is 20 years old this year, and he looks very similar to Hoskard. The second son, Karl, who is 16 years old this year, but he is already taller than his father and his elder brother. He just graduated from a mission school last year and is now working as an apprentice with a tax officer of the governor's office. Before Hoskard learned about Sigfurs and the governor, the news to deal with Hader is Watkar, who told Hoskard, Hader and Olaf, "Stay with me. When the court meeting starts next Tuesday, let's go to the governor's mansion together." Hoskard enthusiastically pulled Hader and his son into the room, and at the same time said excitedly, "Tomorrow Kadir will also bring his son-in-law over. Let's have a few drinks tonight." Hader nodded and said with a smile, "Okay. No matter what the outcome of the court meeting, we are all prepared. We will relax these days and wait until next Tuesday, depending on the situation." "Yes." Hoskard narrowed his eyes. His tone was a little gloomy. "Isn't it the worst thing to do is murder and defect? Wendland has Hagrid. We have a way out." Olaf and his 2 cousins sat aside and listened to their parents while licking Hazel. Neither cousins showed any changes in their expressions. Obviously, they knew and supported their parents' plans. Olaf knew that his father had found 2 uncles last month, and listening to the words they talked now, it was obvious that both uncles were willing to advance and retreat together with the Hader family. As he talked, the night was getting darker, and the lights made of animal fat in the house seemed brighter. Olaf's aunt and 2 cousins brought several dishes of meat, including smoked lamb's head, boiled lamb intestines and lamb, fried salmon, smoked puffins, and boiled carrots. There is also a pot of oatmeal and brown bread. Everyone presented a plate while eating and chatting. When the meal was over, Hoskard and Hader sat aside holding 2 bottles of wine and drank in the next hut. Olaf and 2 cousins who were curious about the history of the Heir family and Hagrid's expeditions blew up and talked about things in the Far East under the name of his uncle Hagrid. The Great Wall, Beijing Palace, Nanjing, the wonders of the world such as the Great Paoan Temple Tower, made the 2 cousins stunned. Is there really a 1,000-mile-long city wall built of stones in the world? That's really spectacular. The Imperial Palace where the Emperor of Ming Kingdom lived has tens of thousands of rooms? Then they are really too rich, Olaf grinned and said. In Iceland, except for the governor and the wealthiest leader, the silk, porcelain, and tea that no one has used before are all bought from Daming. Oh. I saw a blue bottle in Master Amir's house. According to him, it is Oriental porcelain. It is very expensive. The big cousin Calm clapped his hands and remembered what he had seen at the tavern owner in Dagen. Porcelain bottle, talking excitedly. Carl who curled his lips and said in a low voice, the first half of the governor's mansion is the conference hall, and the second half is the governor mansion. I have seen many porcelains there. It is indeed exquisite and beautiful. I heard that a porcelain bottle of the governor can change a boat. Oh. So valuable. After talking for a while, Olaf felt sleepy, so he got some hot water in the wash basin to scrub his hands and face. The 2 cousins were still unfulfilled, and mumbled that they would go to the Far East again. Olaf rubbed his upper arm and thought in his heart, I want to take a look too, but I am afraid it will be a long time later. The next morning Olaf got up and started doing push-ups and sit-ups. The 2 cousins who slept in the same room got up and looked at them curiously for a while, and then they also learned to exercise, but they were struggling after a few strokes. Olaf, are you working out? Is this kind of action effective? Carl who asked, rubbing his stomach. Olaf stood up after doing 100 push-ups in one breath, and smiled. This is a very good exercise. You can also do it, but you must grasp the breathing rhythm and the movements should not be irritable. When Olaf knew the 2 cousins were working out, there was a neigh of horses outside, followed by the voices of laughter from Hoskard and Hader. Olaf had an idea, and knew that it was another uncle, Kedir, who had arrived after a while. Hoskard shouted outside, Calm. Carl who? Olaf. Come out, you reading www.uucan'tyu.com, your uncle Kedir is here, because the Icelandic language is the same as English, Danish, French and other languages. The uncles and uncles are not subdivided, and they are collectively referred to as a word relationship. Therefore, it is necessary to distinguish between uncles and uncles or uncles according to the situation. Olaf pushed the door, and the 3 of them went out and saw Hader and Hoskard talking with the 2 men. These 2 men, a tall man with blonde hair, bulging eyes and a cross face, looked terrifying, standing in the room close to Hader, and more than 1 head taller than Hoskard. Next to the blonde man was a younger man. Looking at a 30-year-old man, this man was handsome and had a tall nose, but his figure was a little thin. Olaf walked over and hugged the blonde man, and said affectionately, Uncle Kedir. Kedir pulled down the wolfskin cloak with his left hand, touched Olaf's head with his right hand, and said softly, My little Olaf is here too. The good boy has grown taller again. Over the past 10 years, Kedir has had more contacts with Hader's family, so Olaf and Kedir are more familiar. Everyone talked about the conversation, and Olaf also knew that standing next to Kedir was the brother-in-law who married his cousin Vanhill last year, a man named Heine. He was a Scottish nobleman who lost his land and estate. He fled to Iceland because of a failed struggle. She was taken in by Kedir and then became his son-in-law when Vanhill and Heine got married last year. Both Hader and Catelyn attended the event. Olaf stayed in the village because he wanted to learn to ride in the church. At that time, Catelyn praised Heine for being handsome and aristocratic. Now Olaf took a closer look at this cousin-in-law, and he did indeed have a good skin. As for his character, I don't know. Chapter 16, Court Meeting. Stayed at the Hoskards' house, and Olaf felt that there was nothing to do except tell the story and fool his 2 cousins Hader, Hoskard and Kedir. Apart from drinking and chatting every day, our fighting skills. Hader is about the same size as Kedir, but he has more combat experience, so he can still stay on top of 1-on-2. Heine was holding a thin booklet to study all day. Olaf glanced at it and found that the cover was printed in English, and the title of the book was on the monarchs. Olaf thought for a while and suddenly woke up. This book was a political academic book born during the Renaissance, and was later regarded as a guidebook by many kings, great leaders and dictators in later generations. This book can be regarded as a political ban, because it advocates the separation of politics and morality, or even deviation. Propaganda and compliance will destroy it, and if it is vicious, it will stabilize the regime. It advocates that people are evil and cannot trust the people. Through compulsory means and vigilant psychological treatment of the subordinates and the people, and so on. Olaf has not read it in his previous life, but only read some papers on the monarchy, but even so he has a familiar feeling. Through the criticism of the monarchy in the article, Olaf feels that the author of this book Machiavelli's thinking is very similar to the legalist thinking of China more than 2,000 years ago. The theory of monarchy advocates that human nature is evil and interests are fundamental. If the monarch wants long-term peace and stability, he must grasp the fundamental interests of the people. It requires both the cruelty of the lion and the cunning and changeable fox, because the unarmed prophet has failed, an armed prophet to succeed. The so-called weapons are guns, purses and brains. The bravery and cruelty of the lions is the barrels of guns. The cunning and changeable foxes are the benevolence of the brain. With the barrel of the gun and the benevolence of the brain, they can seize the purse. When the ministers subordinate the people, and at the same time bind themselves and the interests of the people, and brainwash them, the position of the monarch will not be stable. Legalist thinking is similar to that of the monarch, and it is more comprehensive. The Chinese monarchs captured the minds of the people through the Confucian ethics and the sense of nature and humanity. They used the emperor and the scholar officials to rule the world together to delineate the division of interests, and the scholars, farmers, industry and commerce to fix the status of vested interests. Up to the top, they maintained the rule of the feudal dynasty so that in the end, no matter who the emperor changes, it will inevitably still maintain this kind of class rule. Inner sage and outer king is the ultimate realm pursued by the monarch or supreme ruler in the feudal era of China. This is slightly better than the theory of monarchy that only emphasizes the dominance of the outer king and ignores the inner cultivation. However, in China's thousands of years of history, there are almost no people who can be a saint inside and a king outside. The pioneers of the dynasties, such as Emperor Qin, Han Wu, Tangzong and Songzhi, were either inadequate in the business of kings and hegemons, or in lack of personal cultivation and moral standards, and in short, could not reach the perfect state pursued by Confucian culture. Olaf associates a lot of things with his cousin Heine's book. He suddenly became interested in Heine, so he tentatively asked what the books he was reading about. Perhaps it was Olaf's age and identity that made Heine extremely relaxed, so he closed the book and talked to Olaf with great interest. After listening for a long time, Olaf had a deeper understanding of Heine, and through Heine's narration, he guessed that he was a great noble of the Kingdom of Scotland. He might even have some relatives with the royal family. People fight for a family property and fled to Iceland. They want to return to their homeland, avenge their hatred, and seize the property, so they're read on the monarch, which promotes the dominance of the book. Although Heine is a bit neurotic, and his views on the monarchy are even more glaring, but Olaf has to admit that he is worthy of aristocratic background, has a profound cultural background, and has a very accurate understanding of the monarchy. If he has an opportunity to master power, he may also grow into an extraordinary character. Regardless of what he thought, Olaf had a good feeling for Heine, so he extended Heine's words and put forward some Han-Fei's views, which made Heine pale and looked at Olaf in surprise. Olaf, how can you think of these thoughts when you are so young? Goodness God, Heine's face was pale, as if he had seen the devil, but he couldn't help but ponder Olaf's words over and over. In a troubled world with frequent wars, strict laws should be used to restrain the people and let them develop planting and launch wars in accordance with the requirements of the monarch. The people who want to get rich can only be prosperous through farming and through the country's unified departments for trade, and the monarch's money will be there is no end to spending. The improvement of status can only rely on the establishment of military merits, and cannot rely on the shadow of the ancestors. There is nothing that the monarch cannot win in wars. Heine recalled that the great kings in European history were established through great wars and harsh methods. He admired Oliver's words extremely. He felt that Olaf was like a sage, but he was so young, which made his heart a feeling of unreality was created. Olaf smiled and explained, I have heard some stories about the Daemon Kingdom in the Far East. That country was a warring state 2,000 years ago, and it is the same as in Europe now. At that time, thinkers in China wrote books for their own political opinions. Say, to persuade the monarchs of various countries to use their own ideas. One of them is Calitphagia, and what I just said is the point of view. Oh, Heine came back to his senses, his uneasy feeling dissipated, but he looked at Olaf affectionately and smiled. Unexpectedly, Mingo appeared like Machiavelli 2,000 years ago. The great thinker is indeed the richest and most powerful country in the world, because Olaf put forward some opinions that Heine liked and admired. You read www.uu can't you, So he liked Olaf increased, and he also attached importance to this cousin, thinking that he is very mature. When talking to Olaf's cousin, it's like communicating with an adult, which makes Heine feel a sense of comfort that he has been missing for a long time. Just like returning to his hometown in Scotland and becoming a lord again. 3 days passed in a flash, and the time soon came to August 10th. This is a Tuesday, which is the day when Iceland's annual court meeting is held. Iceland began to be a place for Vikings, Germans, in Scandinavia to escape political oppression in the 8th and 9th centuries, and then became a highly autonomous region around the 10th century, which later became equivalent to a country. From the territory of Iceland, all Godi, chiefs, form a court to communicate with outside countries. However, since Iceland was self-governing by each Godi in the early days, the court only exercised its power when it was held every year, mainly to regulate and punish the conflicts between the leaders and the freedmen. The most serious penalty was exile, and the lighter exiled to the deserted Iceland. The island, the heavy ones, were exiled to Greenland. Since the 10th century, the hottest season of the year has been when the Icelandic chamber was held. Under normal circumstances, the Althing chamber lasted 10 days. Later, after converting to Catholicism, it was changed to 1 week. Even though it became the land of the kingdoms of Norway and Denmark after the 11th century, Iceland was managed by the governor sent by the kingdom, but the annual court meeting still remained as nothing more than the general management of the governor, dealing with matters such as commerce, taxation, penalties, etc. When the court meeting is held, the governor convenes Icelandic chiefs and leaders to discuss taxation and handle cases. And slowly, the period of Althing's holding was that the leaders bartered privately, and the time period for trading with or without was equal to the same time as a festival singing and acting in the rural villages of the Ming dynasty. Chapter 17, Governor of Iceland. On Tuesday, Heir, Olaf and others all got up early in the morning, had some bread and some milk, and then went out together and walked towards the central area. At this time the sun had just risen, and there were already many worn-out laborers rushing to the dock on the dirt road. Passing through a few lanes, everyone walked to the central area. The lawn in front of the gate of the governor's mansion was already full of people. Olaf looked at these people wearing Nordic-style robes and hats. They should all be chiefs and leaders in Iceland. Heir and Hoskard and Kadir have people who know each other well, so he brought Olaf, Callum, and Heine, 3 children, forward to talk. Cal, who went to the governor's house early because he had to serve the tax officer. The court meeting hasn't started yet, and the attitudes of many leaders toward Heir have changed compared with the past. After all, the story of the Harrod family has become a household name, and both Heir and Hagrid have become stars. These leaders are also willing to make friends with Heir and become famous figures in the annals of history. While everyone was talking, the door of the deliberative hall on the 3 floors in front of the governor's mansion was opened by guards, and a young black-haired official came out and shouted, "Please come in and rest and sit down." The leader of a village in Dagangbai district and Kadir are cousins, and whispered, "This kid is Sigfus' nephew. Sigfus has not yet come. It is estimated that we will have to wait until noon to meet with the governor and the 3 Protestant universities. The elders are here together." Everyone talked and walked into the discussion hall from under the stone pillars, and then sat down on the wooden chairs inside to talk. Some booze drinkers had already taken out the small bottles of wine from their arms and sat in a crowd. Heir asked Heine and Callum to look at Olaf, while he shuttled through the crowd with Horsgerd and Kadir, displaying the leaders and deacons of other churches in addition to the governor. The most powerful in Iceland are the elders of the 3 parish churches in the north, south and middle of Duggan. The chiefs and leaders are in charge of each other, but since Sigfurs was listed as the governor of Karlsfjord, he has become the head of Iceland. The most prestigious, the highest status one after a long time of chaos. Knowing that the air is a bit hotter, everyone saw that the back door was pushed open, and Karl, who and the official of the Sigforth family in the morning, accompanied a few middle-aged and elderly officials with Potbelly. The old gray-haired official headed by then clapped his hands and said with a throat, "Stop talking." Someone recognized that it was the tax officer of the governor's house, Jagland, who was in charge of taxation in various regions. This man was originally the steward of Lord Karlswin. He was reused when he came to Iceland and became the number 2 of Iceland's actual power character. Many leaders know that Jagland appears, which means that the governor-general is coming. Just as Jagland was talking, a middle-aged man wearing a Danish-style pleated robe and hat walked out of the door. He was thin and elegant, with soft eyes and a smile at the corners of his mouth. Heir narrowed his eyes, lowered his head and said softly in Olaf's ear, "He is Sigforth." Olaf focused on observing the cruel Dagon leader, and then he admired in his heart. "You can't look like a man. This man looks like a scholar." But he didn't expect it to be the enemy Sigforth. Sigfurs looked around with a smile for a week, and only paused on Hader. Then he bowed and saluted in the direction outside the door with chagrin, yelling, "My Lord Governor, please come." There was a tapping sound. A white-faced young man with grey curly hair was wearing a velvet blue-bottomed aristocratic robe, dragging a long lace fold behind him, and he walked in with an arrogant and serious face. The leaders also hurriedly stroked their chests and bowed to salute, shouting unevenly, "Hello, your Lord Governor." Olaf is relatively short in the crowd, so he is regarded as strict without salute. He saw through the gap that the governor of Iceland was wearing thin, closed-length long trousers under the robes of Iceland's governor Qualsman. He also wore brown leather high heels on his feet, but the heels were sky blue. The strange outfits were mixed together. His handsome face and medium height made Olaf feel very strange in his heart, and he felt that there was no trace of beauty except for Olaf. No one in the conference hall would think that there is a problem with Kolsvin's dressing, because the aesthetics of this era have the imprint of the times, and Kolsvin's dressing is actually very elegant. If it weren't for his Danish royal bloodline, only this kind of dress is not qualified to wear as the governor of Iceland. Therefore, the wearing of Kolsvin is also to show his status and majesty. Please sit down. Kolsvin walked to the sofa on the high platform under the east wall and sat down, pointing to other places beside him, and smilingly said, "Elder Urikel, Elder Honrad, Elder Amai, West Lord Jurfers, please sit down." After Calvin walked out, 3 priests wearing embroidered gilt-rimmed robes and silver crosses on their chests followed him, and these 3 are the 3 chiefs of the Icelandic Protestant Church: the church elder in the center area, Urikel; the church elder in the south area, Amai; and the church elder in the north area, Honrad. The 3 elders and Sigfurs sat beside Kolsvin, and then everyone sat down again. Jagland sat on the high stool on the left and shouted with his voice, "The Icelandic court will officially begin. This year, the various agricultural taxes to be paid in various places will not change, but because our country is attacking the German region, you need to raise additional funds. Military expenditures are supplied to the Treasury and Finance Department. The governor decided to increase the kingdom donation and weapon maintenance costs." UU reading www.uucanchu.com. The amount of money collected varies according to the size of each area. Now I will read about the war donation and other expenses that each district will pay this year. Australia Village 200 silver mark. Burley area 300 silver mark. White Hazel Grove Harrit Village 400 silver mark. Darwell Village. Yagran finished speaking, the discussion hall buzzed and exploded, and many leaders babbled about their difficulties, and they all talked about the difficulties with emotion, indicating that they could not pay such a huge amount of war donations. The heads of Iceland actually have great autonomy, but they can't avoid making peace with every governor. After all, the governor is making a fortune with all kinds of exorbitant taxes. The heads of various regions can find ways to collect some and pay some to meet the needs of the governor, and in many cases, leaders and village tax officials collect miscellaneous taxes to make money, so everyone is not disgusted with these things after all. Untouchables are leeks. How can you get rich if you don't cut a crop? No matter how poor the boundary is, as long as there are people, you can always squeeze out oil and water. However, this year the governor collected too much money in the name of war donations. For the village of Harrit in the White Hazel Forest, 400 silver marks means that every household has to bear more than 10 silver marks, and more than 10 silver marks basically equals 3 gold marks. 5 French gold coins as the most expensive animal. A horse can only be sold for 8 or 9 gold coins, and a cow is worth 5 gold coins. The value of a cow or 10 silver marks is enough for ordinary people to earn 4 or 5 years of hard work. Therefore, it is almost impossible to collect the donation of 1 cow at once for the free citizens of Iceland, who have not had much oil and water for a long time. But Governor Kolsvin is a famous and powerful. His status are very distinguished. He has a guard holding 100 people. The Icelandic chiefs dare not be too rude. They are all blushing and rough bargaining with Jagland. Chapter 18, War Donation. Kolsvin sat still and said nothing. After everyone had been arguing for a long time, the 3 elders stood up and persuaded everyone to contribute money to the great cause of the Protestant gospel. This time the leaders could only listen with anger. After all, whether or not to pay, the elder's face still has to be given. When the 3 elders had finished speaking, Governor Calvin coughed slightly and stood up and looked down at the dozens of leaders in the hall. War donations must be turned in. The icy voice made the leaders in the room feel humiliated and angry. Just when the atmosphere was solemn, Sigfurs got up suddenly, touched the manicured beard on his lips, and said, "Our king is on the front line with the Holy Roman. The mercenaries of the empire fight for life and death. As citizens of the Kingdom of Denmark, it is also our duty to pay the donation. However, the number set by the governor is quite large, and we may not be able to get it for a while. Can we pay half first? The rest will be paid next year." Sigfurth's identity made Karlsvin also have to take it seriously. He thought for a while and waved his hand. "You can discuss this issue with Jagrin in private. Appropriate adjustments are also okay." Cowell's words sounded like the sounds of nature, which made most of the leaders breathe a sigh of relief. Olaf watched with caution, and whispered secretly. Karlsvin and Sigfurs, the three elders, and Jagland were clearly acting together. I guess it wasn't for the Danish side to ask for very few war donations, or else there was no war donation at all. These people got together to act, fooling the more than 60 leaders on Iceland to take money. Although Olaf thinks that the methods of Karlsvin and Sigfurs are very simple, he has to admit that it is still very effective against Icelanders who are stiff, and the leaders who originally wanted to reduce more than half of the exemption were shook by Sigfurs and accepted the plan of taking half first and then handing in the next year. This made Olaf challenge Sigfurs, and Karlsvin increased his vigilance, thinking that these two men might be very cunning. With many conspiracies, Karlsvin pushed the problem to his men, and the cacophony of arguments began. Jagrin was surrounded by many leaders to discuss the matter of paying the donation. After half a day of fierce talk, the leaders were finally allowed to pay half first, and the rest would be paid next summer, but an additional 10% interest was charged. First of all, the situation is stronger than the people. Secondly, the Kingdom of Denmark has won successively in the 2 years of war. I heard that it has occupied several areas in northern Germany. The stronger the Kingdom of Denmark, the less the head of Iceland dare to confront the governor. After all, they cannot provoke the opponent. Denmark. When the leaders and Jagrin signed the donation receipt and agreed on the payment date, 1 hour has passed, and it was almost the afternoon, and Karlsvin ordered everyone to eat at the governor's mansion. So I waited for a long time, and everyone's stomachs were filled with a portion of boiled venison and brown bread. After eating a full meal, Jagrin announced the end of the first day of the court meeting and continued the next morning. Waiting until the next morning, Heir and his party came to the meeting hall here. This is where the leaders of various regions reported to the governor on the deaths of population growth and penal cases. 2 days in a row were things in other villages. Olaf was dizzy and nauseous. On the third morning, the leaders of the Northwest Territories were discussing the exile of a criminal who raped a woman. After a while, the scene suddenly calmed down. Then Sigfurth's son and daughter's family, Weiss, the leader of the Combe Canyon area, stood up, walked in front of the governor, pointed at Heir and sneered, and said, "Your Excellency, recently there have been a story of the Harrod family circulated in Iceland. I know it was written by Elder Amy. I respect this story very much, but the person in the story is very bad. That Hagrid is a murderer. Up to now I am still at large on America. I strongly demand that Hagrid and Heir who protected him be severely punished. Otherwise, the law of Iceland will lose its prestige. The rock of law in Thingvellir is still standing. The oath of our ancestors, we cannot forget." Weiss's words were like a thunderbolt in the clear sky, making everyone in the conference hall agitated. Heir and the others had been wary of Sigfurth for a long time, but he did not expect that. He asked Weiss to say that this was something that Heir had expected. Cowell's text was silent, and the three Protestant elders were also silent. Sigfurs gave Jagland a wink, and Jagland stood up and agreed, "Yes. The stability of Iceland needs to maintain the sanctity of the law. I suggest that the governor redispose of the case 8 years ago and give Sigfurs one. Confess." Kadir snorted coldly, and said with a throat, "Although Hagrid killed a man, he killed little Sigfurth in a duel. The duel is a matter of life and death. Let's not talk about this. 8 years ago, Heir paid for it. Is it always true to give Sigfurth 10,000 marks? Is this money not enough?" "Of course not enough." Sigfurs stood up suddenly, his face was blue, his eyes were fierce. "If my son hadn't, he would develop a fleet under my training in 8 years, and he would have earned $2 now. More than 10,000 marks. Without Heir's protection, Hagrid would not be able to run away 8 years ago. Now Heir is not there, Heir will take his place instead of Hagrid. The punishment for Heir 8 years ago was too light. Please." The governor rejudges the case. While talking, Sigfurs bowed to Karlsvin to salute, and then cried out in tears about his pain of losing his son. The supporters of Sigfurth and the supporters of Heir started to argue in terms of the original Icelandic law. Hader and Sigfurs have been cleaned up, but Danish law still has to hold the murderer responsible. Hader helped Hagrid escape, although he was not guilty. But it can also allow the governor to reconfirm that the governor had mishandled it 8 years ago, which can further increase the punishment of Hader. This treatment method was planned by Sigfurs long ago. The purpose is to destroy the Hader family and occupy Hader's property. Revenge is only part of it, and the main purpose is for money and land. Although Karlsvin had agreed to help Sigfurs before, the Hader family has recently gained momentum, and he has just collected war donations. He felt that he could not force Hader to be too ruthless, because there are already 20 leaders who have helped Hader speak. More than one. This went beyond Karlsvin's expectations. And it surprised Sigfors. Sigfurs watched Hader, Hoskeld, and Kadir talk freely, and he sank without rushing, knowing that they were here prepared. Seeing that the leaders of various places in Iceland were helping Hader to speak nice things, and even the leaders who had promised to fight together before also spoke vaguely, which made Sigfors extremely annoyed. The native Icelanders did not understand the benefits of public opinion propaganda. Although Sigfurs was smart, he did not realize that the story of Grove family would bring such great honor and benefits to Hader because he was not exposed to research. When so many leaders to help him, Hader's family saga can be so useful? It's really unexpected. Sigfurs didn't know. In fact, Hader was able to get the help of more than 20 leaders, not just because of his family saga, but also partly because Hader had already started before the appearance of the Hrut family. Visited the leader of some relationships. Chapter 19, The Crisis is Over? Hader's early response and the saga assists. The superposition of various reasons makes Hader's popularity rise. As a result, there is a leader in the conference hall helping Hader and the mud. After all, the amount of compensation paid by Hader 8 years ago is already very large. Moreover, Sigfors is allowed to destroy Hader's house today, and Sigfors will be allowed to destroy Hader's house tomorrow. It is possible to deal with other families. No matter what kind of purpose, everyone must save Hader. Although the Icelanders don't understand the truth of the cold, but they have a proverb that warns them of this truth. The nose is just in front of the eyes. Therefore, if you don't protect your nose, your eyes will be unavoidable. There was a messy argument in the discussion hall all afternoon, until the sky was dim and there was no result. Sigfurs has a high voice and a melodious tone, as if he was reading an ancient poem. Hader and others seized the established facts that had already been compensated. Although the scene was unfavorable to Sigfurs, he still wanted to plead Hader and impress Karlsvin and the leaders because Hader had Olaf reminded him in advance. He had already paid most of the family's fortune 8 years ago, and the brothers were not obliged to suffer together. The other leaders also said different things, but in the end they couldn't say anything about it. The three elders frowned upon hearing it, and Karlsvin was also a nobleman, and it didn't take long to see that Sigfurs wanted to reverse the case again. So after the sky dimmed, he snorted coldly, stood up and patted the table, and said, "Don't quarrel. The case of Hagrid 8 years ago has already been dealt with, and Hader doesn't need to be punished again. But the criminal Hagrid is still wanted. If there's heat in Iceland, you should report his traces as soon as possible. Strangle the public after the arrest." The governor finally made a final decision, and Sigfors's plan was in vain. After saying goodbye to the governor, many leaders hurriedly left the conference hall in groups, and then went to eat and drink in twos and threes. A big stone fell in Hader's heart, and he invited a few of his best connected leaders to the tavern to drink and eat meat, and he returned to Hosked's home after drinking. In the middle of the night, Olaf went back to the mission school directly. After all, the matter related to the rise and fall of the family has ended. Even if the court meeting is going to take place for another day, Olaf is not interested in listening. Before breaking up with his father, Olaf reminded him that it was time to pick up the goods, and asked Hader to go to Elderhongred to pick up the bullets tomorrow. In the evening, Sigfurs, who was drunk, returned home. His wife stepped forward to help him take off his coat and asked, "Master, have the Hader family bowed their heads and pleaded guilty?" Sigfurs yelled and cursed, "It's a son of a bitch. May God condemn him. Hader's life is so great. The other leaders have all told him nice things. What about the governor? Did our son-in-law agree to deal with Hader?" The woman's white lead powder covered her wrinkles and freckles. She pointed her voice and asked, "I have planned for this year. Going to Herat village for a holiday in winter." "Why? The governor doesn't do anything." "Hey," Sigfurs sighed, rubbed his temples, and smiled wryly. "Karlsvin is a politician. He cherishes feathers the most. He just collected war donations. How can he offend the leaders? This thing can't be done. Then let the Hagrid family who killed my son live happily in Iceland." The woman snorted coldly, "I'll ask my brother to kill Hader's son." There are a lot of murderous skills on his pirate ship. Guy, Sigfurs nodded, his eyes flickering. What's the use of killing his son? What we want is his property. Hader will be in Dagon for these 2 days, and the day after tomorrow, he's expected to return to Heir village. Kill Hader. You have to pick it up on his way back. If you kill it, take the body to the sea and throw it away. Forget it, I will go to Oslo tomorrow and talk about how to do it myself. This shot. Hader must die. At the court meeting the next day, Hader and others found out that Sigfurs was missing. They all thought that Sigfurs had been hid and embarrassed to show up, but they didn't know that the crisis of Hader's life had come. There is a simple port in the Strait of Cape Byrg in northwest Iceland, where several Kirk ships are docked. There are some dilapidated houses on the coast. In the largest house, Sigfurs is sitting with a one-eyed, black-haired man talking. We are pirates wanted in England, Scotland, Ireland, Denmark and Norway. If we go to Dagon to kill, it would be too dangerous. The one-eyed man has deep wrinkles on his face and his skin is smooth and yellow. He taps his fingers on the table, thinking about his brother-in-law. Can Sigfur's requirements be achieved? Sigfurs coughed lightly and said, Dagon can't go. You have to intercept and kill Hader on the way back to Heir village. After the killing, the corpse will be taken away, let alone leave a trace, so you have to send one. Go to the most capable person. Don't worry, we have been cooperating for many years. If you killed Hader, he will share 10% of your wealth, Sigfurs said, gritting his teeth secretly. The man in front of him is his wife's brother Ozil. He has been an island since he was young. He was later wanted by the Nordic countries for notorious deeds, but he took him in and asked him to help smuggle some furs of polar bears and Arctic foxes. Selling to Danish dignitaries. You reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. After all, the taxation of buying and selling fur through formal channels is too high. Of course, Ozil will also do some murder and arson for Sigfurs, but the frequency is not high. This is the first time he has dealt with a leader of a village. Ozil also has to think about the consequences of finishing this order. If he misses his whereabouts, he can't stay in Iceland anymore. I can stay in Iceland now. If I kill the Icelanders, I am afraid I will hide in Greenland in the future. Let's just quietly sell some bear skins, fox skins, and wolf skins. Wouldn't it be good? Hader's family property is worth about 10,000 marks. Think about it. Sigfurs's faint words made Ozil's decision on the spot and smiled. Isn't it just killing someone? It's done. There are 6 or 7 people under Ozil, who are all bad guys who have killed people, but Ozil is still the most powerful in terms of means. He thought about it, and grinned. I went there in person, and I happen to have seen it before. Dar, Sigfurs nodded and whispered, you have to dress up. Although no one in Iceland knows that you are a one-eyed Blackbeard crossing the Danish and Scottish waters, you still have to be careful. I know this. Ozil took off his black blindfold and blinked his 2 bright eyes. I will leave tomorrow. Hader will definitely disappear. Sigfurs felt a little settled, got up and put on his hat, then turned his head and said, I'm going first. Remember, you must do things cleanly, don't worry. Sigfurs, Ozil got up and sent his brother-in-law out, then walked to the shore and whistled. After a while, a few fierce men appeared from nowhere. I'm going to do something on the island. You guys look good at home. Yes, boss. Chapter 20, Assassinate. The Althing conference in the whole region of Iceland is finally over. Start on Tuesday and end on Saturday. On Sunday morning, everyone said goodbye to Hoskard and left. Hader took Olaf home with Kadir and Heine. All 4 of them rode large and small horses. Hader's horse was also pulling a small 2-wheeled cart, which was covered with hay. Bring a matchlock and 5 boxes of ammunition. In addition to Olaf's face of harmless humans and animals, the 3 adults also wore swords and weapons around their waists. They walked on the sparsely populated Icelandic dirt road and appeared arrogant. Many pedestrians and villagers living on the roadside looked in amazement and found that without the characteristics of criminals wanted by the government house, this time I feel relieved. Leaving the Dagangnan district, which governs more than a dozen villages, the surrounding area has become more and more desolate. Kadir took off the reins, took off his hat and nodded, saying, we should go east. Hader, you have survived this winter. Why not live in Selfis? My grey mountain village welcomes you and your sister. I'll tell your sister when I go back. Karina may miss you too. If we don't say anything, we will go anytime. Haha. Hader also took off his hat and gave it back. He laughed. May God bless you. Good luck. Goodbye. The 2 adults shook hands and said goodbye. Heine waved his hands to greet Olaf. Then Kadir and Haina fought to the east, and Hader and Olaf went west due to light rain last night and fog this morning. Hader and Olaf also did not go fast, but Olaf's riding skills improved a lot on the way home this time, and he was able to control the old horses under him freely. Iceland's excellent thoroughbred horses are all in the stables of the governor, elders, and regional chiefs. Hader has only 2 decent foals, but they also have some bloodlines for the horse. Even this kind of horse is worthwhile. It's not cheap in most families. There are short and sturdy breeds of crossbred pony and crossbred horse. It is convenient and cheaper to use for farming. The shoulder height is less than Olaf's nose. According to Olaf's estimate, it is 1 meter. At a height of 3 or 4, he is now riding a smaller horse. After walking east for a while, he saw a birch forest in front of him. Hader pointed to the forest and said with a smile, "This is the forest in the northwest of Will village. It was originally the forest used by our ancestors to build the house." His Muffwill, Olaf knows that the White Hazel Grove Heir village and the 3 surrounding villages are one area, and his father is the leader of this area, but now the leader's rights are too restricted and he can't control the affairs of Will village at all. Tutau is Olin's father glanced at the birch forest and couldn't see his head. Olaf felt that there were a few hundred acres. He shook his head and said, "This forest is worth a few hundred marks." "Yes," Hader smiled, "you study hard, and you will go to sea with me in a few years. In the future, we will have to pass it to you in the village of Herat to see if you can inherit the glory of Herat." Olaf and his father walked into the woods and laughed. Hader pointed to the brown hairy bulge under a birch not far away, and said, "This is birch velvet, and it's useless. It's just scratching when you're constipated. Drinking water can help ease your bowels. You drank it several times when you were a kid." Olaf remembered that he would travel to Xinjiang in later generations. The birch velvet was fired for thousands of dollars a caddy, saying that it was for making tea and drinking anti-cancer treatment. Although he did not believe it, he still calculated in his heart, there will be a chance to take the Nordic birch in the future. The velvets are all pulled to the sky, maybe they can sell for a good price. There was a sudden hay not far away, and both Hader and Olaf turned to look. But after seeing a birch with twisted branches more than 20 steps away, a hatchet flew out and slashed towards Hader's front door with a whiff of wind. Hader often experienced life and death struggles during robbery at sea. In the crisis, he had no time to pull out his weapons to resist, and hurriedly leaned over to the left. Snapped. Even though Hader was hiding fast, the throwing axe was also fierce, and the handle of the axe still swept Hader's right shoulder blade, making him fall down with a cry. After twisting the birch, a black-bearded man with big eyes and round face flashed out. He was sturdy in shape and ran quickly with a big axe in hand. Olaf seldom even fights in his previous life. In this life, he has never seen fighting or killing for 10 years. Although he has long known that this is a troubled world, he also knows that people die from wars and plagues every day. He thought he had done it long ago. "I was ready to kill and be killed, but when I saw the thugs attacking his father," he rushed with a sullen expression on his face. Olaf's body suddenly lost consciousness, unable to move, trembling all over, excited in his heart, and his heartbeat sounded like a heartbeat. Boom! Like a drum. Ozil squatted in the birch forest early in the morning, and when Hader came in with a blond boy riding in, he threw a throwing axe to kill Hader, but Hader was very responsive, but was knocked off the horse. Ozil rushed out with a shout, and the more than 10-pound axe in his hand slashed at Hader, who had just gotten up on the ground with a long sword at his waist. When Hader rolled off his horse, he got up from the ground as soon as he turned his body. He drew his sword while looking at Olaf. He found that the black-bearded man who attacked him did not kill Olaf, but struck him with an axe. And, while raising the sword in his hand, he scored a point on both legs. Crack! The axe and the sword blade made a harsh sound and sparks. Hader fell to the ground when his hands were weak. He was amazed, knowing that this somewhat familiar man might be stronger than himself, and his right shoulder. The severe pain caused the lack of strength in the right arm, and it was obvious that he couldn't beat this person. Ozil was overjoyed when he saw an axe knocking Hader down. He stepped on Hader's abdomen and was about to chop it down. Hader Yugwan caught a glimpse of his son Olaf not far away holding a branch and standing behind Ozil, hurriedly tossing and slashing at the back of Ozil's left instep with a sword. Hader's screams covered all the fine sounds. Ozil resisted the pain in his feet and chopped off Hader's head with an axe, but after the light of his right eye he noticed a flash of dark shadow, and then his right ear was severely painful. Fell to the ground. Hader struggled to lift the long sword that was almost broken by the axe and stabbed it towards Ozil's heart. Ozil was pierced to death with a sword by Hader before he could react. Ozil's breastbone was suddenly broken when he stabbed under the long sword. Half of the short sword was stuck on him, and the top half was still held in Hader's hands. Hader sat down, panting heavily, looking at Olaf standing aside with a look of surprise, and laughed. Okay. The descendants of Jared are brave. Thanks to my Olaf, otherwise. Dad was killed by him. Olaf swallowed, dropped the blood-stained tree branch that pierced Ozil's ears, and sat down on the damp and cold ground. It turned out that Olaf, who was frightened and silly, jumped off his horse after the first sound of the axe hitting the long sword. His mind was blank at the time, and his body also picked up a greasy long stick. Holding a birch branch with him, he squeezed the branch that was as thick as his wrist and approached the attacker, and then pierced it out, hitting the attacker's side face, causing him to fall down, and then Hader killed him. Attacker for Olaf, he was just trying to save himself and his father's life, but if there is no experienced Hader to cooperate, or Olaf's strength is less, maybe the father and son will really be killed by Ozil. In the birch forest, after resting for a while, the smell of blood in the air gradually became stronger. Seeing the blood flowing on the soil in front of him, Hader spit out a thick sputum, then leaned into Ozil's face to observe carefully, and then shook his head and muttered, "This man is a bit familiar, and I don't remember what his name is. But he seems to be from which district of Dagon? I have no grudges with him, so why kill me? Is it a robbery?" As he spoke, Hader turned over on the dead body. Reading www.uucan'tchoo.com finally found a bag of silver and copper coins of shilling pennies, probably worth 3 or 4 marks, and nothing else. Olaf took a breath of air pressure to calm his mood, stood up and asked, "Do you know this person who attacked us? It seems a bit familiar, but I can't remember it. It seems that I saw it somewhere a long time ago, but I haven't said anything." Hader shook his head and clapped his hands. "It should be he wanted to block the way." Olaf shook his head. After all, he is someone who has watched brain-burning movies and TV shows such as Gong Dao and Murder, and he feels that things are not so simple. Is it possible that he was the assassin sent by Sigfus to kill us? After all, Sigfus was ashamed at the court meeting. Not only did his plan fail, but he also lost face. He is very likely to hire a murderer. Hader rubbed his hands, frowning silently. Olaf continued, "The only people walking along this road are from the villages of Harald, Will, and Grindaway, but among the 3 villages, who else will go out or come back this morning besides you? People squatting here. I think it's probably for us." "Possible." Hader nodded and took Olaf to the side with a serious face, and said, "You ride to Will village and call for someone. No matter who is the one who killed me, now we must notify the people in Will village. According to Iceland's law, after a life case is committed, the first person to meet must take the initiative to explain everything, and then they will act as witnesses to prove that I was attacked and killed the murderer, and finally send the murderer's body to the governor's house." Please, the governor confirmed that he was right. "If Sigfus hired the murderer to kill me, we can't spare him. In case someone robbed me, the murderer and his family could accompany us with some money." Olaf hurriedly mounted his horse and quickly left the woods and hurried towards Will village in the west. Chapter 21, Down One Rake. Not long after, Olaf took the mayor and tax collector of Will village, Arnolen, and 7 or 8 males back to the birch forest. Arnolen greeted Hader first, and then ordered people to lift the dead Ozil, put it on a carriage, and then politely said to Hader, "Hader, the murder is my Will village, please go to the governor's mansion with me. It's just a robber. Let's clarify the matter. You and I will not be responsible. Maybe you can still get some compensation." Hader nodded, first unloaded the wooden frame on the horseback and mounted it on the back of Olaf's horse, and then ordered Olaf to go home first, and he followed Arnolen and his group to Dagon. Olaf knew that Arnolen and others did the certification. According to Icelandic law, his father and the others explained the situation to the governor and it was all right, so he took the horse back home slowly. When he got home, Olaf first moved the guns and ammunition into the house before seeing his mother come back. Seeing Olaf came back by herself, Katrin asked about Hader. Olaf explained the situation. Katrin frowned and asked, "Your father didn't recognize who that person was?" "No." Olaf shook his head. Caitlin wiped her hands with a linen cloth, and glanced at the sky. At noon, the sun was shining, and the fog dispelled. "If you don't know it, it's not a vendetta. No investigation is needed. Maybe you can come back tonight." Caitlin smiled and turned to cook. Olaf went back to the room to talk to his younger brother and sister, and then had a meal of fried fish. At night, he didn't see Hader coming back. Olaf began to feel uneasy. He was always worried that the assassination was not as simple as robbery, but the fact was that Hader killed the murderer in a counterattack. This kind of thing must be reported by the governor. If my father is gone, there will be other crises in case someone wants to do things again. The more he thought about it, the more worried he got. Olaf went to tell his mother Catelyn about his concern. Catelyn was about to put the two children to sleep, and after hearing what Olaf said, he walked outside, her face uncertain. The murderer may have been discharged by Sigfurs. If he and the governor unite, your father might really be in trouble. Go to Jot. While talking, Carina took Olaf to Jot's house, shouting a few times to call Jot out. Jot. This morning, Katrin explained the situation. Jot's face changed, and he turned around and ran to the stables to lead the horse, and said in a hurry, Katrin, you are at home to watch the children. I will take Olaf to Dagon. Katrin and Tom sent Jot and Olaf out on 2 horses, and suddenly reminded, if you have trouble, don't forget to call Hoskard. Do not worry. Jot's puffy voice faded away. Olaf did not dare to slow down while riding a horse at night, and rushed to Dagon before midnight. There were guards on the pier and the central area at Dagon at night. Jot took Olaf and led the horse to ask the guard Hader about the situation, but the guard ignored the 2. Hoskard suddenly appeared, pulled the 2 of them in left, turned around an alley before standing still. His face was ugly, his eyes flashed under the moonlight, and his tone of voice was low. Why are you here? I'm going to the village of Harrod. I happened to see you. What? What happened to my father? Olaf's heart sank and asked. Hoskard sighed. I only learned this afternoon. Hader brought a group of people and a corpse to the governor's mansion in the afternoon. He said that someone intercepted and killed him in the morning. He killed that person when he fought back. The governor may inquire. After the crowd, let people come to identify the deceased, and prepare to let your father go home. But at dusk, my mind suddenly changed. The governor sent guards to arrest Hader, saying that he was fighting with a dead man named Hazel. He killed the man by mistake, but lied and framed others. Tomorrow, he will summon the 3 elders. And several district leaders are preparing to sentence your father to sentence. What's going on? Jot panicked. Olaf gritted his teeth and said, it must be Sigfors. I guess he sent the person who intercepted my father, and now the governor changed his attitude too. Jot turned around, stomped his foot, and sternly said, forget it. If tomorrow is to be sentenced, Hader will have to be exiled to the glacier to die. I'm going to Hudik now. Hoskard, you go to Kredir. Let's rob Hader tomorrow and betray Iceland. Okay. Hoskard agreed first, then frowned and said in a low voice, tomorrow, if you want to rob Hader, you will have to deal with the governor's 100 guards. Those guards are all personal soldiers of the Dam family. They are well versed in the battle. 20 are musketeers. How can we rescue Hader? Jot thought of the 100 guards of the governor of Iceland. His mind instantly cooled down, and he said anxiously, what can I do? If the verdict is true tomorrow, he can't be saved. Olaf scratched his head and stepped forward and said, don't worry. I'll go to Elder Amy. If he says something good for his father tomorrow, he might be saved. What if it's not saved? Hoskard asked. When the guards press Hader to the glacier, he will have to freeze into popsicle in a day. Olaf flashed a fierce look in his eyes, and said with a dumb voice, if there is no help, we can't do it in Dagon tomorrow. Wait until the guards his father on the way to intercept and kill the guards, save his father, and then flee Iceland. Okay. Both Jot and Hoskard nodded. www.wooksiaspet.com. Olaf, you are right, just do it. The tormented Olaf trio muttered for a long time, and then the 3 of them first went to see Amy. After seeing Amy begging, he said that he would speak for Hader, but if the governor made up his mind, he might not change the outcome. After the 3 of Olaf thanked them, they went to Hoskard's home to rest, and until the next morning Hoskard sent Kalm and Karhu to find out the news. Karl, who was doing miscellaneous work at the governor mansion, returned within an hour. I heard from my teacher Harry, taxation officer, that Sigfurs and his wife were crying to the governor at dusk yesterday. They said that the dead man was called Hazel, the brother of Sigfurs's wife, who had been living in northern Iceland. Living in Clay district. Yesterday I heard that the governor went to Hader without reversing the murder of his nephew, and his uncle questioned him. As a result, the 2 were killed by Hader during the fight. Now that the governor is convinced of what the Sigfus said, he has ordered a trial meeting in the afternoon to exile Hader to Vednagical. The news that Karl who brought back made Olaf and the others understand the ins and outs of the matter. Hazel is the one sent by Sigfus to intercept Hader. Hoskard is not tall, but his tone is high, and he coldly snorted, we have to prepare early. Yufei nodded, and said, time is not waiting for anyone. I can't wait for the outcome of the trial. I'm going to find someone now, and I can come back tomorrow afternoon. You are here to guard, let's get ready to intercept Hader. Olaf pulled out and whispered, I have 10 muskets in my house. You can bring them here. You should be able to use them. Jot had heard that Hader had bought 10 muskets in Hongrit's place before. He was not surprised when he heard that, so he hurriedly led the horse and left. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Poison. In the afternoon, Olaf and others ran outside the governor's mansion to wait, but the trial of Hader was conducted indoors, and they could not know the situation. Waited anxiously for more than an hour, knowing that the sun was going down soon. Before seeing the 3 elders and several leaders come out, Olaf hurried over to stop Amy I, and asked, Teacher, how is my father? Amy I looked serious, shook his head slightly, then waved his hand, and said, The governor has a firm attitude. He has already been convicted of violating and killing someone. He will be exiled to Vetnagical early tomorrow morning, and I can't save him. After speaking, Amy I sighed and left. Hoskard also learned about the situation from his familiar leader at this time, and pulled Olaf up and walked home. Olaf's face was gloomy, and his teeth gurgled when he returned home. Huskelda sat down with Olaf, and then ordered the 2 sons to take out the bows, arrows, spears, long swords, and large axes from the house to wipe them and sharpen them. Olaf slowly stood up in the rustle of sharpening his knife, and said firmly in his eyes, Uncle, we only have to save my father halfway tomorrow. By then, there will be really no place to stay in Iceland. Icelanders value their families and are serious about family relationships. Hader and others were prepared long ago. Although things have changed a lot, they actually turned out to be the worst. Hoskard couldn't bear to let Hader be killed, so he said coldly, Don't worry. Your father arranged it in advance. You and Uncle Cattle, Hudik, and Jod are all prepared. It's not just killing a few. Did a guard defect out of Iceland? I was about to go to Vinland to see it. Olaf felt relieved, knowing that Vinland, where Hagrid lived and operated in North America, was everyone's retreat. This was the basis for everyone not to fear rebellion. Boy, go to the governor's mansion to guard immediately, and see if Kallisvan is going to send a few guards to Hader to Vetnagical. Hoskard walked to the courtyard, took the iron sword in Karlhu's hand, continued to sharpen the blade, and at the same time ordered Karl, who agreed and left quickly. Karl, hurriedly returned when dusk approached. Dad. Olaf, I inquired. The governor sent 4 guards to Uncle Hader to the glacier. Hoskard's face was slightly relaxed, and he muttered, 4 people. I may be able to deal with Jot, Hudik, and Kadir, but I have to go to the glacier to ambush first. I don't know how long Hudik will be there. Olaf asked about the details of the 4 guards of Kalhu, and learned that they were only ordinary guards, but they would also carry spears, bows and crossbows, wear leather armor, and would tie Hader's hands and feet to make him unable to escape with inconvenience. Hoskard sent Olaf to rest, while he took his 2 sons and his wife to plan how to escape after the hands-on success, and failed how his wife and son would escape responsibility when Kalm and Kalhu were both young and vigorous. There were stories about the Hrut family, and they admired the spirit of daring to kill and fight in it. They all expressed their willingness to go with their father to rescue Uncle Hader, and then fled. Until the next morning, everyone got up early in the morning, and Karl, who continued to go to the governor's mansion to check the news. Olaf and Kalm went to guard outside the governor's mansion. When the sun rose high, they saw 4 guards in leather armor and spears walking out from the side door of the governor mansion, carrying a bag and carrying a tall man. Seeing that his father was tied with a rope, his hands were tied, and his feet were also tied, leaving only a long distance for the next step. His hair was messy and his head was downcast, like a bereaved dog. Olaf's eyes reddened and his fists clenched. Hoskard stopped the 4 guards on the street, sent some dried meat and water and silver coins, smiled and asked the guard to take care of his brother-in-law Hader, and winked at Hader at the same time. Hader, who had prepared for a long time, understood it, and then ate some jerky under the service of Hoskard, drank some clean water, and prepared to regain his strength as soon as possible. It takes 5 days to walk from Reykjavik to Vetnagical Glacier. This is a more serious punishment for murderers by Icelanders. Exiled to a glacier with no humans at -10 degrees below zero is tantamount to letting people fend for themselves and torture themselves dead. After Hader was taken away by the guards, Olaf and others waited anxiously at Hoskard's home. Waited until the night. That day, Jot brought Kadir, Hyena, and Hudic over. They rode a horse-drawn cart with 10 matchlocks, ammunition, swords and axes and other weapons. Huskard told the four that Heir had been sent to that magical glacier. Hudic spit out, his eyes flickered with fierce light, and the scars on his cheeks were shaking slightly. Kadir, Huskard, Hyena, and we set off on 5 immediately, killed the guards on the grassland in front of the glacier, and rescued Heir, and then Olaf and Mrs. Huskard, you took your family's belongings as originally planned. Going to the beach in the south of Herod village, I have asked Little Hill to sail down the road. The Thor's hammer will stop on the beach tomorrow, and we will be safe when we board the ship to Wenland. This is my eldest son Callum. He is 20 years old this year. He is also a helper when he goes there, Huskardla said to Callum. The 4 guards have all participated in the Battle of Kalmar, and they are considered elite soldiers. We bring more personal control. Hudic is the most professional about fighting, killing, so he became the backbone as soon as he arrived. Looking at Callum's sturdy figure, Hudic nodded and said, all right. Let's go now. Everyone agreed, and Huskardla asked her wife to take care of Karl and Olaf. First pack up the property and go to Herod village to wait. Huskard's wife actually didn't want to rebel and defect, but she couldn't stop it. She knew it was about the lives of the family, so she could only agree just when everyone took their weapons, bows and arquebuses, and set them up to leave on horseback. Olaf suddenly grabbed Hudic and whispered, I'm going to follow too, trick or treat. Hudic cursed with a calm face, are you a little baby going to die with you? Go home and wait. Olaf didn't mind arguing with Hudic, and quickly spoke his thoughts. A few uncles, listen to me. Although you are brave, it is not easy to deal with the 4 guards. If there are casualties, neither my father nor I can accept it. So I want to go with you. What can you do? Go home and stay to help us. Olaf did not speak. You reading www.you can't you? Hudic interrupted roughly. Huskard and Hyena believed that Olaf must have a good way. If they could easily win the 4 guards, they would be willing, so they persuaded Hudic. It's good to hear Olaf's idea. What if it works? Even if it's useless, it's not bad time for this candle. I think Olaf is definitely not making trouble if he wants to follow along. Hudic took a breath and asked, what do you think? Let's talk about it. Olaf hurriedly expressed his thoughts. Olaf thinks that among the 5 Hudics, except for Hudic and Kadir, they are all ordinary people. It is also good to say that they are a mob. If they can't beat the 4 guards, they would be a joke. Even if he was able to fight, he would have to pay the price of 1 or 2 death or disability. Olaf didn't want to take such a risk, so he thought he could let Huskard bring him to catch up and see him as Heir's son. As soon as he saw Heir, he gave the 4 guards some meaty spirits, poisoned the food, and waited until they ate and drank. Once Olaf's thoughts came out, the few people who only knew about hacking, slashing and slaying were stunned. They thought about it and found it very interesting. Olaf, you think well, but we don't have poison. Hudic gave a light cough, then shook his head. Olaf sneered with confidence. I have. What? What poison do you have? Olaf looked at the surprised expressions of several people, picked up the candlestick on the table and went to the yard to pull out a few potatoes that had just bloomed. He pointed to the small green lump stained with oil under the rhizome and said, This is the poison I use to deal with the guards. Chapter 23, Wait for the Rabbit. Potatoes are not unfamiliar to anyone in later generations, because everyone has eaten them since they were young. Potatoes can be fried, and snacks like potato chips and French fries are foods that children can't give up. But sprouting and green potatoes are poisonous. Everyone knows that if you eat it, you can vomit and diarrhea, while dehydration, convulsions, breathing difficulties, and even death. It is the beginning of the 17th century. The Spaniards brought potatoes from South America to Europe more than 50 years ago, but they have always been regarded as ornamental plants. At most, the leaves of potatoes are eaten by the English and Irish people, but even in the country of dark cuisine, there are not many people who can adapt to that unique taste. There are also many people growing potatoes in Iceland. There are more than 10 plants in Huskard's yard. They are used as ornamental plants and occasionally pick up some leaves and cook them. Iceland, where supplies are scarce, can't buy and has no poison. Olaf wants to poison the 4 guards and can only consider sprouting green potatoes, using the selenium in the potatoes to deal with the guards. Watching Olaf pull out 2 potatoes, saying that the roots of the potatoes are poison, whether it is Hudic, Huskard, Callum, and Hyena, all frowned. Just as Olaf was whimsical, Olaf knew they didn't believe them, and saw the impatient look on their faces, and then pretended to be a ghost again. This is what Uncle Hagrid said when he sent a letter to my father. Potatoes were cursed by the Inca natives of America. Food, potato rhizomes will have the power of a devil curse before they mature, and when they germinate, they will vomit and diarrhea, and their mind will be unconscious. If they eat too much, they will die. Olaf pulled out Hagrid's tiger skin, and everyone had to be suspicious. Husgard knew Olaf's miracle best, so he nodded and said, "Okay. It's up to you. What else do you want?" Olaf said that the unripe green potatoes were washed clean and cut into fines, then cooked with a diced meat, sprinkled with salt and black pepper, and given to the 4 guards. They would definitely not refuse this kind of delicacy. Husgard gritted his teeth and asked his wife to take out the black pepper from the house, and cooked a pot of mashed potatoes according to Olaf's request. When it comes out of the pan, it really has a tangy aroma, which makes people can't help but speak. "Is this potato roots really food?" Heine said in disbelief. "It looks like it is." Husgard nodded. "In the future, you can have more options, and ask Hagrid how to eat without poison." He took the clay pot and packed the mashed potatoes, took out a pot of wine, chopped the green potatoes and poured the juice into the wine. Olaf clapped his hands in peace and said, "Let's go. Uncle will take me first. Go and get food and drink. Let's wait until the guards have eaten the toxin and attacked." Husgard did not seek Hudik's advice this time, and brought Olaf an old horse from the stable. Hudik reminded the group of 6 people that they were worried that they would leave Dagon in the middle of the night and the traffic would be too much, so they left Dagon slowly in 2s and 3s, and agreed to be at the old side of Alting in the Sindwelly area, under the low rock set. Olaf, Husgard and Callum were the last to go out. They walked north for a long time, then turned to the east, passing 3 or 4 villages along the way. It wasn't until the sky was bright that I arrived at a large valley. The north side of the broad valley was a tall mountain, with rugged rocks and dead vegetation. Olaf felt that looking at the dusty clouds was especially like the lonely mountain in The Hobbit. On the south side of the valley is a huge lake. The water vapor on the lake is shimmering, and no one can see it. "This is the place where our ancestors convened Alting hundreds of years ago. There is the legal stone." Husgard pointed to a huge rock standing in the broken wood in the valley, and said with emotion, "Our ancestors immigrated to Iceland and established a free home. We set up a court in the unit of family, and elected Godi as a self-government. The law, how cool and happy it is. It's a pity that Norway was forced to become a citizen of the King of Norway and have to pay all kinds of taxes. When will we be able to become independent again?" Olaf knew that what Husgard was talking about was the aspirations of most Icelanders, and because he wanted independence, he did not want to be ruled by Norway and Denmark. Later, he finally became a sovereign country in 1918, which lasted until the 21st century. Icelanders are inherently free and brave. They have been exploited and squeezed after submitting to the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway. This has made the resistance of the Icelandic people more and more serious. After the middle of the night, Husgard saw Olaf a little sleepy, and watched Kadir before they arrived. They said, "Olaf and Callum, come down and sleep for a while. I'll call you when everyone is there." Olaf thought of his father when he closed his eyes, couldn't sleep at all, waved his hand and said, "I won't sleep anymore." The 3 of them had a conversation, and after eating something, they saw someone riding a horse from the west, and they came in and recognized that it was Hudik and Yod. After waiting for a while, Cattle and Heine also arrived. After eating and drinking, the 7 turned on their horses and headed east. The 7 Olaf set out one day later than the 4 guards who escorted Hader, but they drove a lot in the middle of the night. The 4 guards are all riding horses, but Hader is walking. According to the estimation of speed, Olaf's 7 are about to catch up with Hader. Going further for a long time, you can see the gushing spring water from the geyser. There is a village there. Hudik concluded that the guards will take Hader to stay there tonight, so the 7 people rushed to the geyser ahead of time in a semicircle. In the nearby Hukadar area, there are more than 10 geysers, which are surrounded by white mist all day long, and the surface temperature is much higher than other places, but there is no arable land, and there are no other production conditions except for grazing, so there are not many residents. Olaf saw many strange fountains along the way. Some were only less than 1 person tall, and some could be as high as tens of meters at the moment of gushing. This kind of peculiar beauty of nature made Olaf amazed, but it was not to save his father. He even stayed here for 2 days deliberately, seeing enough of the geyser. Others seemed to be accustomed to geysers and did not show excitement. A group of people walked hiding in the village in Huakadal. UU reading www.uucanchu.com arrived in front of the bay of the Shorso River in the afternoon. This river is one of the largest rivers in Iceland, and Hader's Thorshammer Kirk had stopped here in the lower bay. There is a village on the east and west banks of the Ziorasuo River. The village on the west bank has 7 or 8 households, and the east bank has only 4 or 5 households according to Hudic. These are fishermen who rely on the river to fish, and sometimes they ferry across the river to collect copper coins. The east bank of the embankment of the west bank village, more than 2,000 steps south, is a pine forest. Hudic surveyed the terrain and took Hoskard, and they cut a few small trees and cleared a place to rest, waiting to Hader tomorrow. The guards came and intercepted them. Although Iceland has been developing for hundreds of years, the population of Iceland has basically not grown much due to its geographical location, rigid conditions and underdeveloped crops. Olaf listened to Amy's lectures when he was in a church school. The government estimates that the population of Iceland does not exceed 50,000 at most. The higher the altitude in Iceland, the more unsuitable it is for people to live. Therefore, 90% of the population lives in the coastal areas of Iceland. Olaf and the others obviously couldn't see the people after they passed the Huikadal area. They didn't see a few houses until the Shorsa River, but for the trouble of meeting, Hudic and the others still avoided a few families on the west bank and hid in this pine forest. Olaf, who was resting on the blanket, watched a few squirrels who were not afraid of people and looked down curiously on the trunk beside him, and smiled. Hudic 6 collected dry wood and lit a fire to cook a pot of smoked venison porridge. The 7 people used a wooden spoon to eat a pot of porridge, and then Hudic stepped on the bonfire. He and Kadir, Heine, and Yacht shared a good night, and the others went to sleep wrapped in blankets. Chapter 24, Kind Father and Filial Son. Olaf was awakened by a bird call in the morning. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the chirping birds on the canopy, and there were several eagles circling and dancing in the sky. After slept in the wild, Olaf felt much better. He lifted the blanket and stood up. He saw Hudic and Hoskard, Kadir, Heine and Kalm sitting in front of a pile of pine firewood. Hoskard cut the brown bread with a knife, and prepared to bake it on the fire. For a while Olaf put away the blankets, and saw Ute walking in with a large bundle of pine branches. Olaf is awake? We'll have dinner in a while. Olaf picked up 2 wooden sticks to go to the depths of the woods for convenience, and when he returned, he had already cooked a pot of porridge. After a few people had their breakfast, they heated the mashed potatoes on the fire, and then Hoskard took Olaf away on horseback from the southern end of the pine forest and ran on the dirt road to the west. Hudic took Kadir and Yoth ready to go, grabbing their weapons, and at the same time let Heine and Kalm hang far behind Hoskard, and if there's an emergency, he can return to report in time. Olaf and Hoskard walked for a long time until they turned their heads and couldn't see the pine forest, and the huge and towering Hekla volcano in the south was blurred. And then they stopped. We're waiting here. Hader might be there by noon, Hoskard said in a low voice, estimating the time of his feet. Olaf dismounted and waited with a crock wrapped in animal skins. After about an hour later, he saw 4 guards riding horses appearing in the west, slowly walking eastward. Come on, the 2 of them led the horse to the west. The moss turf under their feet was squeaked. After a while, they could clearly see the 4 guards on horseback and their hands and calves bound behind them, who could only walk forward in small steps. Stop. The 4 guards suddenly saw Olaf and Hoskard approaching, and they clenched their spears and asked, Brother guard. I am Hoskard, a good citizen of Dagangbai district. You don't recognize me? This child is Hader's son. We know that Hader has committed a crime and will be exiled, so their family entrusted me to send this child. See Hader. Hoskaldra stood still far away with Olaf, and then slowly approached as he spoke. The leading guard had a pale yellow skin and looked like an Eastern European. He had a big beard and a spear in his hand. He remembered that Hoskard had seen Hader off a few days ago, so he asked, You guys, how did Hader get ahead of us to see? Hoskard said with a sad face, Oh. We don't know where you are. We chased our Huds in a hurry. Thinking that you might not have crossed the Shorsa River before, you turned your head and went back to try your luck. Sure enough, I saw you. Hoskald took the crock from Olaf, put down the small barrel of wine he was holding, and said with a smile, This is the diced potatoes we made for the 4 of you. Mud is a famous dish newly invented in France. If you are tired from walking, stop and rest, eat something, drink some wine, let this kid talk to his father, okay, just stay here for a candle, and then you leave immediately. The 4 guards thought for a while, then looked at the young Olaf and the short and thin Hoskald, nodded, and after speaking, took the crock barrel and sat aside to eat and drink. Olaf and Hoskard both agreed to walk up to Hader and looked at Hader, whose face was haggard and his cheeks collapsed. They both felt sour. They knew that Hader had suffered in the past few days, and he still had trouble eating and drinking. If you really just walk to the glacier like this, you may have to die if you don't arrive. Hoskerd secretly scolded Sigfurs and called Sven for being vicious, but Olaf hugged his father and whispered in his ear the plan to rescue him. In the eyes of the 4 guards who were paying close attention to the 3 of them while eating and drinking, it was Olaf, the child holding his father Heir, expressing his yearning and concern. Heir was a little excited when he saw Olaf and Hoskerd. After hearing Olaf's plan, his body trembled with excitement, making a guard laugh loudly when he saw him. After a while, the guards who ate up a crock of mashed potatoes and drank a barrel of beer stood up and praised the deliciousness of the mashed potatoes with diced meat, and then ordered Olaf and Hoskerd to leave quickly. Hoskerd quickly walked east with Olaf, and the 4 guards turned on their horses leisurely and contentedly, and then the last guard pulled the rope connecting Heir's feet and said, "Go. Let's go faster today." In the evening, just rest on the east bank, the leading guard stretched out his hands with black mud in his nails and buckled the shreds of meat stuffed between his teeth in his mouth, and said indistinctly, "After eating the food delivered by your son, I won't leave in the afternoon. You have a rest. Humph, your family can afford black pepper, you deserve to be the leader of a district." Olaf and Hoskerd walked far away, and they couldn't see the guards on horseback when they turned their heads. They turned their horses back to the south and galloped back to the east. After a while, the 2 saw Heine rushing out of the bushes to grab the reins. "How is it?" Heine asked anxiously. www.wooksiaspit.com. "They all ate it." Hoskerd slapped his forearm, and said with joy, "We are lying in ambush in the woods of the west bank, and wait until they have started to poison." Olaf estimated that it would take an hour for the guards and father to walk near the west bank, when the beer in the stomach catalyzed the solanine, and they would react quickly, so they also agreed. "The woods on the west bank are too close to the village. We can tie our horses in the woods. People are lying in the bushes outside the woods. When they approach, they may also become poisonous, either pulling strength or stomach cramps. You can succeed by swarming." Hoskerd and Heine believed Olaf the most, and laughed at the words. The 3 of them hurriedly rode back to the woods, and met Kalm on the road, and finally saw Jot, Hudik, and Kadir, who heard the movement. Olaf explained his plan here. Hudik did not object this time. Instead, he frowned and looked at several people around him. Seeing that they were all convinced by Olaf, he coldly snorted, "Not in the woods. In an ambush, the 4 guards are more likely to escape on horseback. But if the potatoes you mentioned can poison them and make them vomit and vomit, I think it will be effective if we ambush outside the woods. I don't think we have a better way. Since we choose to try the poison you mentioned, we will believe you in the end." Olaf breathed a sigh of relief, and took a long sword from the side of the Hoskerd my backpack, and said, "Thank you, Uncle Hudik. Thank you, Uncle Hoskerd and Uncle Kadir. Thank you, Heine and Karm, the closest person to my family. Thank you." The corner of Hudik's mouth was slightly tilted, and he said coldly, "Let's go in ambush." After saying that, he left with the archer and the sword on his back, and the others hurriedly followed. Olaf smiled, and walked firmly to the end. Chapter 25, Ambition. Olaf and Hudik and his group of 7 lay on the back of some bushes more than 200 steps east of the pine forest. Hudik's eyes had better be the most forward and looked west for a while. A little bit of time passed, and the shadow under the sun also turned from west to north. 4 guards on horseback gradually appeared on the blue-yellow ground in the distance. They were lying on the horseback as if asleep, and Heir behind him walked with his head down and 1 foot shallow. "Attention." Hudik whispered and took out his bow and arrow and aimed at the approaching guard. Hudik uses an English longbow, which can shoot 200 steps away, and has an effective killing distance of 150 steps. He secretly estimated and entered the range of the guards, with a high concentration of energy. Olaf and the others also cheered up, squeezed the weapons in their hands, and waited for the guards to get closer. The 4 guards stopped their horses when they were about 100 steps closer to Hudik and others, then they swayed to the side after dismounting, took off their pants and squatted down. It took a while before they came back slowly, clutching their stomachs. It took a long time for the 4 of them to get on the horse, and finally urged Heir to go faster with his father and mother. Seeing the guards looking sickly, Hudik and the others were pleasantly surprised. Knowing that the toxin of the potatoes had an effect, they were more convinced by Olaf. Hudik, who originally planned to do it within 100 paces, saw the 4 guards lying on horseback and not having time to pay attention to the surrounding environment, so he planned to let them come closer to do it. He kept his breath and waited for the guards to come closer for 50 steps, and their facial features could almost be seen through the gaps in the bushes. Hudik only let go and shot an arrow, and at the same time shouted, "Hands!" Hudic flew out with an arrow, swished through the back of the headed bearded man lying on horseback, leaving him still immersed in abdominal pain and died. Boom. The 4 horses were still moving forward, but the dead guards fell headlong and made a heavy noise. The remaining 3 guards turned around and saw a long arrow emerging from the beard. They hurriedly got up and picked up. Look forward to the weapon on horseback. Wow! Another feather arrow flew to hide a man's face door and shot him off the horse. The remaining 2 saw 4 or 5 men rushing in front of them with weapons in their hands, rushing to resist the abdominal pain, gritted their teeth, picked up weapons, and prepared to charge forward. At this time, the remaining 2 guards had blurred vision due to diarrhea. They couldn't see Olaf and Hoskud. They thought they were refugees who hadn't eaten enough to rob them, thinking that they would be defeated by riding a horse. Kadir saw that he was only 20 steps away from the guard, took down the short spear at his waist and threw it forward. 2 iron spears flew out with a whining wind. One flew out of the forearm of the guard on the left, and the other centered on the heart of the guard on the left. This guard was also unable to avoid being blocked because of his body's loss of strength and confusion, otherwise he would never be stabbed to death by a flying spear. The last remaining guard arrived in front of Hoskerd, Callum, and Heine in an instant. The 3 dared not stop, and hurriedly avoided on both sides. If the guards were at their peak, they would ride out a semicircular arc to kill one person first, but now he can't control the horse to make this kind of action, so he can only turn the horse's head and rush towards Callum. Callum and Hoskerd also used the traditional Viking skills to throw a short spear and axe at the guard. Heine's swordsmanship was good, so he approached from one side and pierced the guard with a sword when the guard was approaching. 3 or 4 flying spears and flying axes smashed down with their head and face. The guard dodged to flying axes, but was hit by a flying axe and a flying spear on the shoulder blade and arm and fell off his horse. Heine turned his feet in front of him, and with a puff the rapier in his hand pierced into his body from the gap in the guard's leather armor, and the guard uttered a low pain from his throat and convulsed to death. Olaf ran to Hader quickly and separated the ropes that bound his father with a knife. Hader moved his hands and feet and walked to the body of the guard who had been turned into corpses. After turning around, he said in a low tone, "Killed guards, Iceland and Denmark, Norway, and the Faroe Islands can't tolerate us. We can only go to Hagrid, pull the corpse away and bury it." Hudic stepped forward and pulled up the leg of a guard, and then everyone worked together to pull the 4 corpses to a remote place and bury them. Then they returned to the woods to lead the horses, and a group of 8 people and 11 horses drove west, in order to prevent the road. Recognized as causing trouble, Hader also wrapped half of his face in a cloak. On the morning of the 3rd day, Hader and his party arrived at the Hickertal area, which is close to Dagon, and it takes less than a day to reach Dagon on horseback. Siegfrieds may be singing and dancing with Korsvan in the governor mansion, drinking red wine and dancing with the ladies of the various families. But we are going to exile overseas soon, and we are going to fight for territory with wild people. Damn it, Hader looked at the far west. His sharp eyes seemed to want to kill enemies in Dagon through the void. There are nearly 100 governor's guards in Dagon. There are also the servants of the Siegfrieds family, the guards of taverns, shops, and cattle stores. We can't avenge our revenge. Hudic reminded him anxiously that he was worried about Hader's anger and doing stupid things. Hader looked back at the worried gazes of some of his closest relatives and friends, and smiled. Up to 5 days. 5 days later, before the guards return to Dagon, Karlsvan will send someone to investigate, and we can't hide it if we kill and escape. It's over. These 4 or 5 days are our prime time. We will soon meet in Herat village and leave by boat. But we still have to come back. It's just time for revenge when we come back next time, perhaps after killing the guards and overcoming psychological barriers. Hader became majestic and ambitious. Olaf knew that the 30 Years' War was going on the European continent, and the Black Death and War were raging. The attention and strength of all countries are limited to the battlefield. Overseas colonization is also the initial stage of backwardness. Maybe you can be bolder and more ambitious. In the future, you may not be able to sweep Iceland to avenge your hatred with a large army and enter Europe at the same time. A great figure in the history of history, Dad, uncles. I think we come back again to liberate Iceland, so that we Icelanders can free themselves from Danish rule, and it's time for us to be the masters of our own country, Olaf said and looked around. Everyone outside Hader was shocked. Olaf's immature face glowed red, his upper body sitting on horseback straightened, his eyes firm and excited, his face full of passion and longing for the future. In the eyes of Hudic and others, they felt that Olaf's bravery and ambitions are different from ordinary people. This is a talent that transcends age, knowledge and status. This discovery makes everyone think that what Olaf said may really be realized in the future. Hanna recalled a few years later and still remembered that in the Hoykotal area, Olaf rode his horse and pointed at the big port in the mist. The heroic temperament of a lion and the great ambition of changing the world in the tone of a lion, he believed at that moment, he truly became a close friend of Olaf from the heart. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. The fastest mobile version update URL. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.